In Marvel, I am Homelander. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction. So don't try any techniques you hear here in real life, your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 151 Supergirl. The crazed expression lasted only a second before Luthor instantly returned to normal, nodding and saying, "Let's proceed as Batman just said. If everything goes smoothly and without any major incidents, the chance of killing Homelander is over 10%. Only 10%? Diana repeated. This time, our enemy isn't like Superman in the comics, with any psychological weaknesses. His only physical weakness is kryptonite. With the chips we have, even a 1% chance of winning would be a huge win for us. If we could use the people around him to threaten him, the chances would be even higher." Luthor said regretfully. "Unfortunately, everyone connected to him is on Earth in another universe, so we won't have a chance to meet them. As for those slaves who disobeyed the Homelanders, we can also recruit them. Those slaves, though only 1% of the population, account for more than 50% of the manual labor and are spread throughout all aspects of the Earth Federation. They are a very powerful force. I'll discuss the specific details with Luthor. You can leave now, pretending to be compliant with the Earth Federation on the surface, and then we'll take action against him together when we find an opportunity." Batman calmly gave them the order to leave. Everyone nodded in unison and then left the room in order, leaving only Batman and Luthor in the basement. "Let me ask you a question I've always wanted to know while reading the comics. You and the Joker don't actually have that kind of relationship." Luthor raised an eyebrow, but seeing Batman's expressionless face, he wisely stopped. Everyone knows what the Joker of Gotham is like now. After Homelander ordered 20 criminals to be tortured, the once infamous underground Emperor of Gotham City lost his prestige and became nothing more than the Joker. After Homelander took over DC Earth, the government, knowing the Joker's destructive power, imprisoned him, removed his prefrontal lobe, and prevented any visitors, keeping him in good health with intravenous nutrition until his death. Some had suggested killing the Joker outright, but considering Homelander had only chosen to torture him and not order execution, the suggestion of euthanasia was ultimately cancelled. Just then, the heroes who had just come out of the basement returned one by one. Batman frowned slightly. "Is there anything else?" But in an instant, he saw a beautiful, unfamiliar woman enter with Kent and the others. At first, Batman thought he'd been discovered. Just as he was about to get up, the woman raised her hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not an enemy." Batman frowned, sizing up the woman before him. She had striking features, long, wavy blonde hair, and wore a red and blue bodysuit with a large red S logo on her ample chest. "Supergirl?" Batman asked tentatively, while Luthor's eyes lit up with excitement, as if things were getting increasingly interesting. "That's right, but according to DC Comics, I should be a Supergirl from another universe." "You can call me Linda," Supergirl said with a smile. "I just arrived in this universe myself, and I didn't expect my cousin and you guys to be so ordinary." "A Supergirl from another universe? Which version are you?" Batman's heart began to stir with anticipation. I looked at the DC description. "I guess it's the comic book version. I just tested my strength with Clark outside, and my strength is probably over 10 million times hers," Supergirl said confidently, crossing her arms. With Supergirl's explanation, everyone learned that the other person had actually been suddenly transported to the Marvel Universe via an alternate dimension, and after scanning the entire planet, escaped through a portal and smuggled into the DC Universe. Just as the other person arrived in DC, Clark emerged from the lead-encased chamber, otherwise, he might have gone straight for Homelander. What's wrong with this world? I see those slaves, labeled G-class personnel, doing a tremendous amount of labor, while most citizens are enjoying life, living several times better than in their original world, Supergirl Linda asked. Because she had arrived in such a rush, she hadn't learned much about the planet's history. Because a tyrannical dictator rules this world, Batman said, looking at Clark. I remember you said Homelander is a million times stronger than you? Clark recalled Shendu's description 7 days ago and said, about 1 million to 3 million times stronger, but definitely not as strong as Linda. With our current strength, we can win easily. Very good. Batman breathed a sigh of relief. However, to be absolutely sure, we need to make some more preparations. The plan will proceed as set up earlier, except this time we'll add Supergirl to the team facing Homelander. Then let Supergirl face Homelander head-on. If that doesn't work, we'll rely on you, Barry, to use your last resort. As for the specific time, let's set it for a month from now. Hey, what are you talking about? What do you mean I'll join? Join what? Supergirl shook her head in confusion. A few minutes later, Batman and Luthor briefly explained what they needed to do next. You want me to be the Emperor of the Earth Federation? Supergirl's eyes widened. The Earth Federation was only forcibly united by Homelander. After defeating Homelander, your strength is more than enough to maintain the stability of the regime and prevent too much unrest. After a while, let the people choose for themselves, Batman said. Hearing Batman's explanation, Luthor's expression softened slightly. He was a pure human supremacist. If another Kryptonian was to become emperor, what was the point of overthrowing Homelander in the first place? Alright, although there are still many things I don't understand, I agree. I'll fight the dictator with you guys, right? I'll do it. Linda, trusting her former friends, clapped her hands and agreed without hesitation. With Supergirl joining, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. After all, they were now rebelling, and Homelander had put too much pressure on them. Meanwhile, at the White House, John frowned as he looked at the nuclear fusion reactors his subordinates had handed over. How come only a little over 1,000 were produced today? John used his special ring to put away the miniature reactors, each the size of a cell nucleus, and frowned. Your Majesty, this is already 30% of the production capacity of 7 or 8 of our planets, Jason said humbly. Operating so many reactors a day was already a stretch. Alright, that's settled then. Remember to implement the intelligent robot technology I gave you a few days ago as quickly as possible. Then those slaves will be completely freed from manual labor, John instructed. Chapter 152. Do you want to understand the meaning of life? After discussing the specifics of the Earth Federation, John abruptly changed the subject, saying, What do you think about forming a gay legion? Huh? Jason looked at Homelander in surprise, wondering why he suddenly had this idea. There will definitely be more and more enemies in the future, both men and women. Why not form a male-only group? I can handle the women, and the males can be punished by the male-only group. John stroked his chin, deep in thought. As your Majesty commands, Jason replied. After all, he couldn't disobey John's orders, could he? Very good, then go and prepare. The boy band's name will be changed to Shale in 18 fanfiction, John said. From now on, any enemies who dare to disobey me will be handed over for ideological reform after defeat. After briefly giving instructions, and with Jason gone, John was just about to turn back to studying the Kryptonian technology when a golden portal appeared beside him. Strange walked out looking exhausted and said, We might be in big trouble. John paused for a moment and then asked, This is your third time here this month. Has something strange gotten to Earth over there? That's right. At least one city on Earth over there has been completely overrun, but I've temporarily contained the disaster within the mirror dimension, Strange said. Tell me the details, John said. Dr. Strange gave a wry smile and began his explanation. Since Dr. Strange took over the Ancient One's duties, he had realized just how troublesome it was to be the Sorcerer Supreme. Every day, he had to use the Time Stone for at least 100 long-term rehearsals and tens of thousands of short-term rehearsals to prevent some monster from suddenly appearing and destroying the Earth. Fortunately, with the help of Borwas, that battle maniac, he didn't collapse. But just half an hour ago, he conducted another rehearsal, and in that rehearsal, in just 3 days, the total population of the entire Earth Federation increased 500-fold. 500-fold? Within 3 days? Was it done by that outsider? Does he have some kind of ability to make anyone pregnant just by glaring at them? John frowned. No, that thing from another dimension is actually a parasitic organism, rooted in your memories. It creates a fabricated personality in your brain, and the next moment that personality will be born in reality. And because your brain contains memories fabricated by the parasitic organism, when it appears in reality, you won't feel the slightest sense of incongruity. You'll just feel that this person should naturally exist in reality. In other words, as soon as you think, all sorts of familiar faces from your memories will pop up around you, and you'll have pleasant conversations." Strange said speechlessly. "After my first rehearsal, I discovered that I had an extra wife, 2 ex-wives, 15 friends, and 5 relatives in my memories. I actually lived happily with them for 3 days in the rehearsal without any suspicion. By the time I realized something was wrong, the parasitic organism in reality had already spread throughout the entire city and was still expanding outwards. I had no choice but to move the entire city into the mirror space to prevent further spread." "Alright, I think I know what that is now." John nodded slightly. Based on Strange's description, it should be the alien parasite from Rick Morty Season 2 that could only create pleasant memories. He slowly extended his right hand towards Strange, a gem radiating golden light floating in his palm. After defeating Thanos, he now possessed the space, mind, and power stones in his special ring. The time stone was in Strange's possession, and the remaining soul and ether would soon be his. "Now use your time stone to see if those alien parasites will affect me. Who possesses the mind stone?" John said calmly. After a brief rehearsal, Strange shook his head slightly. John nodded, confirming the claim, and drew a passage to the mirror dimension. "You can go back now. Leave this to me. I'm very interested in studying parasites rooted in the mind." Entering the mirror dimension, John used his supervision to scan the city Strange had banished. The city, originally inhabited by 10 million people, was now crammed with all sorts of creatures born from human consciousness, from humans to Pegasus, all imitations of the parasitic life form. However, using his X-ray vision, he could see that the internal structures of these parasitic life forms were completely different from ordinary creatures. Since he could identify them, things became much easier. He deployed a biofield, covering every life form below, and then John gently tapped his right index finger downwards. Power strong enough to shatter a planet bypassed buildings and life forms through the biofield, precisely striking each parasitic creature. PFFT. With a cracking sound, people watched in horror as their friends, wives, husbands, relatives, who had been amicably interacting with them just a moment ago were instantly crushed by an invisible force, turning into deformed, monstrous corpses. The parasites and their eggs, which had multiplied to tens of millions in an instant, were all crushed to death by John in a single moment. He glanced calmly at the screaming crowd below, then waved his hand, pulling the entire city back from the mirror space to reality. Back at the White House, Strange had just drawn the portal, not even taking a step, when he saw Homelander return. John, anticipating his words, said, "The matter is resolved, but it has caused considerable psychological harm to the residents there. Have Jason and the others issue a public statement explaining this." After Strange left, John looked at the capsule-sized pink parasite egg in his hand. This was the last remaining parasite egg on the planet, perfect for research. 20 days later, deep in the mountains, a 3-person high spatial portal suddenly appeared. On the other side of the portal was a modern metropolis with technology at the level of the 21st century. Inside a high-rise building, a slightly overweight white-collar worker in his 30s aimlessly gulped down beer, but suddenly his computer screen flickered twice, and a pop-up window appeared. "Want to understand the meaning of life? Want to truly live? Yes, no. What is this? Is it spam?" The white-collar worker looked at the pop-up window, initially thinking it was a computer virus, but the next moment, the option in front of him gave him an indescribable attraction, causing him to subconsciously click yes. The moment the white-collar worker clicked the left mouse button, he lost consciousness, and his body vanished from in front of the computer. Only the lingering warmth of the chair proved that just moments ago, there was someone there. Chapter 153 Diary of a Madman. A month after the Justice League's discussion, they regrouped outside the White House. "Let's proceed according to plan," Bruce said, trying to calm his racing heart. After Cyborg's intrusion into the smart terminal, and after several days of adjustments, they had ensured that there was no living person within 100 kilometers of the White House. Meanwhile, high-level figures like Shendu and Boros had been relocated to other planets. Therefore, with information blocked, even if they completely destroyed their current planet, the smart federations on other planets wouldn't detect any disturbance. Is our target the man inside the White House? Supergirl Linda used her X-ray vision to look at the White House. Inside the silent White House, only a young man sat cross-legged on the ground, intently reviewing the data before him. "That's right," Batman said. "When you strike, you must use all your strength to kill him with one blow." "No problem." Linda confidently gave an okay sign. After more than a month of observation, she had witnessed how weak life was in this universe, and she was absolutely confident she could punch the young man in the distance to pieces. Batman stared at Barry and said, "Just in case, be prepared to provide support at any time." Barry gripped the kryptonite dagger encased in lead and nodded solemnly. Batman took a deep breath, knowing that success or failure hinged on the next moment, and after a long pause, closed his eyes and said, "Let's go." Boom. In an instant, Supergirl, who had been poised to strike, soared into the sky, flying at thousands of times Mach, tracing an arc in the air before hurtling towards the boy inside the White House. Inside the White House, John seemed to sense something and turned his head slightly, only to see a beautiful young woman with a curvaceous figure charging towards them, swinging her right fist. Thousands of times the speed of sound didn't destroy the entire Americas beneath her feet. A biological force? Where did this superwoman from? Who wandered in from? She's quite alluring, John thought to himself. Her speed is half of mine, her fist doesn't have any strange superpowers attached, and, John glanced around and saw the Justice League standing outside the White House, understanding the cause and effect. On the other side, Linda, sprinting at full speed, stared wide-eyed at the boy who, despite her superhuman speed, seemed to observe her as if she were a normal person. Her fist, poised to strike the boy's forehead, was easily caught just before it reached him. "Say your name," John said, his right hand instinctively reaching forward to grab him. The next moment, Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. "Feels pretty good," John silently remarked, withdrawing his hand. Die?" Linda roared furiously, throwing a powerful left punch, but John had no intention of playing along. He kicked her hard in the stomach. The next moment, Linda coughed up blood, feeling as if her abdomen had been struck by a planet. Even with the neutralizing effect of the biofield, the terrifying impact still turned the White House beneath her feet into dust. Supergirl failed. Batman sighed, looking at the destroyed White House in the distance. "Barry, it's up to you now." "Okay, Bruce first." Barry was about to agree when he saw the man standing in the crowd. "A pretty meticulous plan, even managing to distract everyone around you. You've been preparing for a long time." John looked at the Justice League, holding Cyborg's cleanly severed right arm in his hand. "I gave you all a chance, why didn't you cherish it?" John sighed slightly, and under the horrified gazes of everyone, Cyborg's superalloy right arm was dismantled bit by bit. "Attack!" Bruce roared, and the next moment, all the Justice League members rushed towards John without hesitation, but in John's eyes, it was all too slow. In the blink of an eye, they were all flying backward, spitting blood. "I think one-on-one is fairer," John said calmly, and the next moment, his body seemed to multiply, splitting into 5 people, slowly walking towards their respective opponents. "And why are you rebelling against me?" "Oh, the inhabitants of Paradise Island are all slaves." John smiled at Diana, and the next moment, the Amazonian queen was in his hands. "Mom." Diana's eyes widened when she saw the woman in John's hands. "You should call her Mom, Mom." John laughed as he tore the queen in two, the gushing hot liquid splashing all over Diana. The extreme pain left her frozen in place, and when she realized what was happening, Diana screamed in terror. But the moment Diana opened her mouth, John laughed as he forced the queen into Diana's stomach. On the other side, John looked at the skeleton retching on the ground. "How does it taste?" "To be honest, it probably won't taste good if it's not cooked. I should have used my heat vision to roast it beforehand." As he spoke, John grinned, revealing cold, white teeth, like a living demon. In the Batman theater, Bruce, who had just gotten up from the ground, threw a punch at John without hesitation, but John smiled and lifted an old man's body to shield himself. Crack! The sound of bones shattering rang out. Bruce, who had always adhered to the principle of not killing, watched as his longtime butler, Zinn, was being supported by John in agony, his slow, aging heart shattered by his own fist. How does it feel to kill your own butler? Batman, who has never killed, has taken his first life, his own butler. John chuckled, casually tossing aside the instantly dead Alfred. "And you?" John looked at Clark Kent. "I've treated you well, haven't I? When you left, I didn't even hold you accountable, and this is how you treat me." John's smile was warm, but his eyes were icy cold. But the next moment, he stared in shock at the kryptonite dagger piercing his heart. The Flash gripped the dagger tightly, his eyes filled with resolve. 5 seconds earlier, Barry was painfully clutching his father's corpse. "And why are you here to fight me?" John looked at the Flash in front of him, tilting his head as he asked, "Your father has already been released by the Earth Federation, so were you misled by Batman?" Holding his father's body, Barry's heart was breaking, but he forced himself to stay strong, gripping the dagger tightly in his hand. "There's still a chance. I still have one more chance. That's a lead-coated kryptonite dagger you're holding, isn't it? Do you think it can kill me?" John laughed, looking at the dagger the other was holding, but the next moment his smile froze, and in Barry's eyes, time began to rewind. Chapter 154: A Stab Across Time. A month ago, Batman looked solemnly at the Flash and said, "Barry, if anyone can defeat Homelander, it's you." "Huh? Eh?" Barry shook his head repeatedly. "Mr. Bruce, no. You have to believe in your abilities." Bruce placed his hands on Barry's shoulders. "Your Speed Force has the power to reverse time, and even if Homelander can destroy planets, he still can't withstand the passage of time. What do you want me to do? I can't go back in time and kill Homelander when he was weak, like in the comics." Barry shook his head in confusion. "You don't need to kill Homelander when he was weak. You just need to reverse time for 1 second." Bruce said. 1 second? Yes, just 1 second. Time returned to the present. Looking at his father's corpse in his hands, the Flash's forward veins bulged. He completely blocked out Homelander's mocking laughter. Only one thought occupied his mind: kill him. 1 second, just 1 second, Barry prayed silently, unleashing his full Speed Force. In that instant, everything in the universe beneath his feet stopped. He did it. Looking at the silent environment and John's frozen face, Barry stood up with sheer willpower and charged towards Homelander. At that moment, the world seemed to flow backward beneath his feet. With each step, time seemed to rewind. "Just do as Mr. Bruce said, remember Homelander's position a second ago, and then stab him with a kryptonite dagger." The Flash thought to himself, aiming for Homelander's chest and thrusting forward with all his might. There was no sound, no image, no warning. Seconds earlier, John had felt a sharp pain in his chest as a dagger abruptly pierced his heart. Because all 5 Johns were after images created by his super speed, the 5, including Cyborg and Batman, clearly saw the green sword tip protruding from John's chest. Success. Batman felt a sense of relief as he looked at the stunned, bowed Homelander. But then he realized something was wrong, because the other 4 Homelanders were still there. Theoretically, a Kryptonian should lose their powers after being stabbed by a kryptonite dagger, so why is Homelander's super-fast clone still intact? It's more like he's actually been ambushed. Sure enough, the next moment, Homelander, despite the pain from having his heart pierced, clapped and laughed. "Impressive, impressive, I didn't expect you guys to actually hit me." John looked at the Flash, who was completely exhausted and collapsed to the ground, with admiration. "How is this possible? How did you do that? Are you not even a Kryptonian?" The Flash, forcing himself to look up, asked with difficulty. Even for other creatures, a pierced heart would be fatal. No, of course I'm a Kryptonian. The kryptonite dagger did have some effect on me. For example, it reduced my current power-up speed by about 3.5%. But if you think kryptonite can kill me, I can only say that it's just a minor fatal wound," John said, gently pulling the dagger out of his heart, and then everyone watched in disbelief as the wound healed instantly at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Idiot, you don't think I'd be like other villains, knowing my weakness to kryptonite and still foolishly taking no precautions, do you?" John laughed, stepping on the Flash's head. "If I didn't have the confidence to deal with kryptonite, this planet beneath my feet would have ceased to exist long ago." John mocked, "I'm reckless because I can win, not because of your self-righteous cleverness. Next. It'll be your turn. Let you taste your father's flavor." John laughed as he grabbed the Flash, and amidst his groans, walked step by step toward his father's corpse. "Over here." John looked at Superman and said, "Unfortunately, your last hope is gone too. I'll ask you one question now, do you regret it?" John asked. Clark shook his head firmly. "Don't worry, I'll make you regret it." John instantly appeared behind Clark, grabbing his neck with his right hand, and in his helpless struggle, instantly soared into the air. "What are you trying to do?" Clark grabbed Homelander's arm behind him, but it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, completely futile. "Concentrate, look ahead," John whispered a reminder. Clark looked up sharply and saw a plane approaching in the distance, right in their flight path. See the passengers? They should have peaceful lives under my rule, but because of your justice, they're all going to die, John said softly, his grip on Clark's neck hardening as he watched the plane draw closer. The passenger plane was approaching at Mach 0.73, and the captain had clearly noticed the two uninvited guests. No, 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 no. Clark and the captain and first officer shouted simultaneously. He was completely panicked, his hands reaching out helplessly to stop the plane. But John wasn't about to let him succeed. The faint biofield Clark released was instantly neutralized. The plane was about to face Clark's flesh, harder than diamond. Boom. With a deafening roar, Clark's face, harder than alloy, slammed perfectly into the front of the plane. He could feel his face collide with the captain and first officer's bodies, their flesh splattering like mud. Then came passenger A, passenger B, passenger C. The collision of mortal flesh and steel resulted, without a doubt, in a pile of minced meat. Seemingly to maximize casualties, John gripped Clark's neck and shook him from side to side like a windshield wiper, ensuring that Clark was covered in the blood of every passenger. Clark's eyes widened as he clearly saw the severed limbs scattered after each passenger's body was smashed. Blood soaked through his suit. Behind him, John, the instigator of all this, remained impeccably dressed. When Clark regained his senses, looking at the azure sky before him, his mind was filled with indescribable terror. "Do you regret it?" John repeated in his ear. Clark hesitated, but was then interrupted by John. Hesitated for 0.7 seconds, looks like it wasn't painful enough. "See the metropolis in the distance?" John grabbed Clark by the neck and pointed into the distance. "Next, your body will crash into it at Mach 3000, and then your mother, your girlfriend." John said mockingly. "No, no." Clark screamed in terror at the thought of that scene. Too extreme, too extreme. I need to calm down. How did I even type such wicked words? Chapter 155 How to Use Kryptonite. Hey, don't you want to? John tilted his head, looking at Clark, whose face was filled with terror. Yes, please don't destroy Metropolis. I know I was wrong. Clark had never pleaded so humbly. He simply couldn't accept losing his family again. Oh, John's lips curled into a wicked smile. Looks like you know you were wrong. I forgive you then. Just don't do it again. Phew. Clark breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, at least his family survived. But since I've forgiven you, I hope you can forgive what I did. John said softly. Clark nodded heavily. He knew Homelander wouldn't let him off so easily, so as long as his family could live, John would accept even if you were torn to pieces. Then you'd better watch, John said, flicking his index finger lightly into the distance. The force of his fingertip instantly wiped out 2/3 of Metropolis, which was dozens of kilometers away. Clark, are you angry? John asked, tilting his head, only to be met with a stunned, heartbroken Clark. Sigh, you're really angry. You promised to forgive me, I even forgave your rebellion. When he finally came to his senses, Clark's eyes were bloodshot and bulging with fury. Even though he couldn't win, he wanted to fight to the death and spill blood on his Homelander. But John's words stopped his attack. I was going to exterminate your entire family, but in the end, I spared your mother and girlfriend, John sighed. What happened to trust? How could he lie to them? What did you say? Mom and the others aren't dead. Clark exclaimed in surprise, his emotions like a roller coaster as he reunited with his loved ones. No, actually they're dead, John laughed, then, seeing Clark on the verge of collapse again, changed his tune. Just kidding, they're not dead, only other citizens of Metropolis died. Is it true or false? Clark's composure was nearly shattered by Kent's antics. Really, although I wiped out 2/3 of Metropolis because of you, tens of millions died, but your family isn't included. John chuckled as he released Clark's neck. Sure enough, after being released, Clark didn't choose to attack him directly. He was probably genuinely afraid, having never encountered such a ruthless individual. Under John's mental torture for just a few dozen seconds, Superman's virtues, justice, perseverance, and morality, built up over the years, all vanished like the wind. At this moment, he had ignored the 10 million Metropolis members wiped out by John, only his surviving family remained in his heart. Almost the instant John released him, he wanted to leave this demon beside him, return to Metropolis, and find his mother and girlfriend. As for revenge, overthrowing Homelander's rule, let whoever wants to do it can do it, his ambition had been completely extinguished. John watched Clark flee with a mocking expression, knowing that the guy was utterly finished, but compared to the others, he had the best outcome. Others who rebelled suffered the death of their entire families, but Clark's rebellion resulted in the deaths of strangers he had never even met. His own family all survived. Sigh, I'm still too kind, John sighed, troubled by his own kindness. Casually disabling Cyborg's shield on the smart terminal, John connected to Jason. Your Majesty, what are your orders? Jason asked respectfully. Just now, I was assassinated. What? Who dared to attempt to assassinate you? Jason was startled, looking up at the virtual projection of Homelander before him. A small tear was visible in his clothes near his chest. He quickly asked with concern, Your Majesty, are you alright? I'm fine. Those who tried to assassinate me were from the Justice League, Cyborg, Wonder Woman, Superman, Flash, and Batman, and perhaps some accomplices, John said calmly. I understand, Your Majesty. Are those assassins still alive? Jason gritted his teeth. They dared to assassinate you, they deserve to die. That's exactly who I was looking for. How is the Shaolin 18 fanfic I asked you to stop? John inquired. Jason immediately understood and replied, Your Majesty, rest assured, the positions of the 18 are ready. I'll have them deployed immediately. One more thing. The White House in this world has been destroyed. Remember to find a few people to repair it quickly. I need to stay until tonight, John instructed. I will certainly fulfill your orders, Jason replied, and then John immediately ended the call. On the other side, Supergirl Linda looked at her current predicament with confusion. After being kicked away by John and flying over an unknown number of cities, her body was stuck after crashing through a wall. What's going on? Where's my strength? Linda braced herself against the wall, trying to move forward or backward. After trying for a while, she helplessly discovered that if she moved backward, the opening was blocked by his huge headlights, and if she moved forward, his full buttocks were also preventing her from getting out. The opening was strangely only the size of his slender waist. Ah! How could this happen? Why have all my powers disappeared? And how did I even manage to smash this hole in? Linda was on the verge of tears. This was too bizarre. Just as she was at a loss, something even more terrifying happened. Behind the wall, which she couldn't see, a hand began to gently touch her ankle, then slowly move upwards. Who is it? Can you pull me out? Or call the police? Feeling the groping hand, Linda suppressed her disgust and pleaded for help. No. At this moment, John walked in from the front, holding a glowing green stone in his hand and laughing, Bad kids get punished. Kryptonite. Linda's eyes widened. She finally understood why she had lost her powers. The problem was, why did this guy look so relaxed? Wasn't he a Kryptonian too? Who is on the other side of the wall? Linda's cheeks suddenly flushed red because the groping right hand behind the wall had begun to pull down her pants. If Supergirl still had X-ray vision at this moment, she would see that the guys standing on both sides of the wall were Homelander. Or if she possessed super speed, she might be able to see John's fleeting figure, but unfortunately, she can't see anything right now. Kryptonite is a good thing. John took the kryptonite and modified it in front of Supergirl, turning the originally hard stone into a fluorescent little umbrella. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Punishment and Slavery. Linda stared wide-eyed at the kryptonite umbrella in John's hand, which looked like a balloon. What do you want to do? Guess what it's for? A reward for guessing right, a punishment for guessing wrong. John grinned wickedly, took a few steps forward, and, seeing her wide eyes, shoved her mouth shut. Meanwhile, Barry collapsed on his knees, nearly vomiting up his stomach contents. His heartbeat had barely returned to normal when he looked at the vomit of flesh before him and vomited again. Mr. Bruce, we were all wrong. Barry knelt, tasting his father's blood, tears streaming down his face as he vomited and regretted. Homelander is simply not someone we can fight. If he had another chance to go back in time, he would refuse Batman's invitation without hesitation. Being Homelander's dog would be too blissful. Just as he was about to collapse from exhaustion, a golden portal appeared beside him, and 18 bald men, their bodies painted a vibrant golden yellow, emerged. Barry forced himself to stay awake and looked up at the people in front of him, guessing they were Homelander's men. "Who are you?" "You can call us the Shaolin 18 Bronze Men Team 1, said the leader, a man painted in gold. As soon as he finished speaking, the 18 men huddled together, striking a very flamboyant pose. "The Flash, Barry, right," the gold-painted man said. "You dared to assassinate His Majesty, committing an unforgivable crime. Now, let us use Buddhism to reform you." "Buddhism?" Barry repeated the word in confusion, then saw the Shaolin 18 Bronze Men begin to move. "What do you want to do?" Barry was terrified and tried to escape, but one of the bronze men had already firmly grasped him. Barry tried to twist his body in terror, but there was nowhere to escape. "Buddhism is boundless, repentance is the shore," the gold-painted man chanted a Buddhist prayer, then pressed down on Barry's shoulder and roared, "Evil. Extreme. Sudden." The next moment, intense pain made Barry scream, cold sweat pouring down his forehead. "Not only here, but every one of these rebels will now undergo the severe indoctrination of a pair of Shaolin 18, a process that will last for at least a year." Late at night, John carried Linda, whose consciousness had completely dissipated, as if she had been pulled from the water, back to the White House. After several hours of repairs, the White House, which had been reduced to ruins, had been restored to its original state. The reason for the rapid construction was that all the builders were Kryptonians. Although they weren't as powerful as John, a dozen Kryptonians working together, with ample materials, could recreate the White House in half a day. Back at the White House, John held the limp Linda in his arms, constantly clutching a kryptonite crystal to ensure Supergirl wouldn't easily recover. Entering the White House, John followed the White House's layout to a bathroom. Several long green chains stretched out from the bathroom walls. These were chains entirely made of kryptonite. This room was also recently created by John, crafted by Zod wearing a leadstone protective suit. John bent down, picked up the kryptonite chains, and with a few clicks, handcuffed Supergirl Linda's limbs and neck. Ouch! Just then, after half a day of torture, Linda finally woke from her slumber, feeling as if her body was falling apart. Opening her eyes, she found her limbs locked, chained like a prisoner in a corner. Awake. John glanced at her and sat down in front of her. "You actually. I'll fight you to the death." Linda, remembering the torture she had suffered, was filled with rage. She got up, trying to grab John, but with the clanking of the chains, her arm always missed his body by an inch. "Don't struggle, it's a waste of energy," John said with a smile. "Besides, with your limbs now restricted by kryptonite, resisting will only arouse my desire. With your current recovery speed, being able to walk normally within 3 days would be considered good physical condition, so don't struggle." John sat cross-legged on the ground, propping his head up and tilting his head to examine the angry, beautiful woman before him. "What exactly do you want?" Linda clenched her fists and said coldly. "Can't you tell? Of course, I'm going to imprison you, and then I can exchange ideas with you whenever I want." John looked at Linda and explained with a smile. "You pervert, you lecher." Unable to physically attack Homelander, Linda racked her brains to think of a mental attack, but the man in front of her was not angered by her words at all. "The harsher you curse now, the louder you might scream later," John said, and a bowl of hot porridge appeared in his hand and handed it to her. "My patience is limited, don't test my limits." Looking at the food offered to her, even though she was really thirsty and hungry, Linda still wanted to reach out and knock it away, but the next moment her jaw was grabbed by John. "If you don't listen, fine." The smile on John's face gradually faded. He gently opened her mouth and roughly poured the porridge into her mouth as liquid food. "It's 10 o'clock at night. You'll stay here and reflect on your mistakes tonight. I'll come see you again tomorrow morning." John stood up, not looking at her again, walked out of the room, and slammed the door shut. After Homelander left, Linda coughed painfully, her throat burning from the hot porridge. Leaning against a cold marble wall, the girl curled up into a ball, but the door that had been tightly closed suddenly flung open. "Almost forgot, you." John tossed a thick blanket and pillow over, covering Linda's head, then said casually, "Don't freeze to death. Remember to take care of your personal hygiene, even if it's just for my sake. Who wants your tattered blanket?" Linda poked her head out from under the blanket, angrily throwing the pillow at John, but it only hit the door that had closed again. Late at night, as the temperature gradually dropped, driven by physiological needs, Linda looked at the scattered blankets in the distance with conflicted emotions. Finally, she let out more breath and muttered to herself, Why not use the enemy's stuff? With that thought, Linda's slender right hand gently grasped a corner of the blanket and pulled it over. As the blanket wrapped tightly around her body, the drop in body temperature finally eased. She lay down on the cold floor, her gaze gradually shifting to the pillow in the distance. This time, the hesitation was less than before. Linda stood up and walked towards the pillow amidst the clanking of chains, but soon, with a sharp snap from the chains, she fell silent, staring at the pillow still quite a distance away. Chapter 157 The Wandering Earth. Early in the morning, Linda woke from her deep sleep, wrapped in her blankets. Even the slightest movement caused her body to ache all over. This discomfort was something she had never experienced before, but now, bound by kryptonite chains, her physical condition was probably worse than an ordinary person's. Times had changed. It was a little better while she was asleep, but once she woke up, an indescribable loneliness began to creep into her heart. Splash! Just as she felt a sense of dread about the enclosed bathroom, the door was yanked open, and John strolled in leisurely, carrying a bowl of congee. "Hungry?" he asked. "HMPH." Finally seeing a stranger, Linda felt a surge of joy, but remembering that her current predicament was caused by this guy, she gave a curt snort. But before she could finish speaking, Homelander stopped abruptly, then turned and walked away without saying a word. "Hey!" Seeing John turn and leave, Linda panicked and asked, "Where are you going?" "Seeing how energetic you are," John said, shoveling the food in his bowl into his mouth before adding, "Then I'll let you go hungry for another meal. I'll come back this afternoon. I was originally going to let you leave." Wait, Linda hurriedly said, "You're willing to let me leave?" "Not now," John said, slamming the door shut, leaving her facing the wall. Damn it. Feeling like she'd been hit by a CPU, Linda angrily punched the wall, but she forgot how delicate she was now, wearing kryptonite. The next moment, tears welled up in her eyes as she painfully clutched her slightly swollen fist. Meanwhile, after leaving the secret room, John returned to Earth in the Marvel Universe, where Jason and the others were anxiously waiting for him. When John appeared at the Earth Federation headquarters, Parallelua was the first to kneel down and declare, "Your Majesty, it's all our fault. We allowed the Justice League to take control of the smart terminals." "Alright, stop with the nonsense. Have the statistics come out yet?" John said impatiently. "They're out," Jason said, forcing a smile. "The total number of casualties last night was 8,736,200, of which the Justice League's casualties were. I know, I killed all 8 million people." John pointed out the problem directly, making Jason and the others break out in a cold sweat. The main issue is that this matter was too absurd. Homelander, as the Emperor of the Earth Federation, didn't care about his civilians at all, killing them without hesitation. And the Justice League, waving the banner of justice, ended up causing the deaths of millions of people because of their resistance. Both sides had huge problems. This incident also made Jason and the others realize that their emperor really didn't even bat an eye when it came to killing people. They were afraid that one day they would displease Homelander, and the Earth Federation would be destroyed by their emperor. "How is the Justice League doing? Have all the involved been identified?" John asked. "The Flash and the others have confessed. Besides them, Luthor was also involved in the rebellion." "The reason for the rebellion is human supremacy," Jason said in horror. Homelander had previously said that if anyone continued to practice racial supremacy, their entire race would be wiped out. And now, less than 2 months later, an extreme example had emerged. Human supremacy? Then let him get what's coming to him, John said calmly, looking down at the crowd. Hearing this, Jason and the others breathed a sigh of relief. At least their lives were spared. "There's one more thing," John said. "Inform the citizens under our rule that they may be moving to another universe." "A different universe?" Rodriguez asked, puzzled. "Could your Majesty explain?" "It's simple. I'm temporarily relocating all the residents of the Earth Federation to a parallel universe." John explained, "This planet could spawn alien entities at any time, and our planet could be destroyed at any moment. So, returning to the parallel universe via the time-space collider will provide a more stable environment. As for this planet, just leave a small force here," John said. Upon seeing Supergirl Linda, he understood that with the increasing number and strength of enemies, keeping the Earth Federation on Earth in the main universe was too dangerous. A planet-destroying entity might appear at any time and destroy Earth. It was better to leave Earth to those constantly spawning monsters. A step back would open up a wider world. But your majesty, there's only one planet in the parallel universe. Relocating the population of our 7 or 8 planets would be a huge burden, Rodriguez said. Although other planets and parallel universes could be developed later, the initial population pressure would definitely lead to a decline in quality of life. It doesn't matter, I just need you to inform your residents. I'll handle the specific relocation work. John clenched his fist and said, except for Earth, which I won't move, I'll move all the other planets directly into the parallel universe. Move planets. Everyone present, including the Holy Lord, was shocked. Boros clenched his fist excitedly and shouted in his heart, has His Majesty reached this level? He can actually move planets. However, since John had proposed the direction and provided a very reasonable solution, Jason and the others naturally had no objections, or rather, even if they had objections, there was nothing they could do. They immediately prepared to implement it after the meeting ended. Soon, after a simple draft of a document, message notifications came to the smart terminals of all Federation residents. Within a short morning, all residents of the Earth Federation knew that they wanted to move to another universe. However, most people on other planets did not object to this, since it was just changing universes and not planets, and it wouldn't have a significant impact on their lives. However, the citizens of Earth living in the main Marvel universe didn't quite agree. After all, they had lived in their familiar environment for decades, and the thought of changing it was unacceptable. Naturally, some people with an emotional attachment to their surroundings didn't approve. Of course, knowing the temperament of their homelanders, the shrewd individuals didn't dare to openly oppose it, but instead expressed their opinions in a very tactful tone through the Earth Federation's citizen suggestion box. These people didn't want to leave, and John certainly wouldn't force them. Life and death were predestined, and whether they left or not was entirely voluntary. In the end, their deaths were none of his concern. Chapter 158 Severe Discipline. At noon, Linda lay on the floor, clutching her stomach, nearly fainting from hunger. Without sunlight to replenish her bodily functions, intense hunger and thirst began to overwhelm her. Homelander said he'd be here this afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? Linda thought weakly to herself. The entire chamber was devoid of electronic devices, only cold kryptonite chains bound her, and she had no idea of the exact time. Under the onslaught of loneliness and hunger, every minute that followed was a tremendous test of willpower. For example, she was already beginning to regret giving Homelander a hard time that morning. Just as she was about to faint from hunger, the door opened again, and John walked in. Compared to the previous times, this time the food he carried was lavish. Its exquisite presentation and enticing aroma brought Linda back to her senses. In that moment of clarity, she almost reached for the food in John's hands, but he easily dodged her. Want some? John picked up his chopsticks, and in front of her, took a piece of perfectly roasted meat and popped it into his mouth, then took a small sip of his cola. Gulp. Watching John eat, Linda, feeling like her throat was about to burst, nodded pitifully. Call me master, and I'll give you food. John tossed a lunchbox in his hand, but Linda remained silent in response. Don't you want to? John's lips curled slightly, and after scanning Linda's entire body with his X-ray vision, he said, Don't worry, as a slave for exchange and learning, I won't let you starve to death. With your current physical condition, you can still last 5 more days without food or water. No wonder you have a Kryptonian constitution. Even being restrained by kryptonite, you can still last so long. John clicked his tongue in amazement. If you can hold on for another 5 days, even if you remain stubborn, I will have to feed you. Hold on for 5 more days, Linda thought silently. Although she felt terrible, she wasn't incapable of enduring it. Then, after you recover your physical condition by eating, I will continue to starve you. John laughed. This time, if you know how to conserve your energy, you should be able to last 7 days. Faced with John's devilish words, Linda's body began to tremble unconsciously. 7 days later, then another 7 days, but don't worry, hunger won't last forever, because you won't live much longer, John comforted her. Now your Kryptonian bloodline is being suppressed by kryptonite, so the signs of aging that are normal will gradually appear on your body. Under my intense torture, you will show signs of aging earlier than normal. If you can endure for 3 years, that is, after being on the verge of death more than 150 times, if you are still so determined and refuse to admit defeat when you are old and faded, then I will admit defeat. And as the victor, You can take your pride and self-respect and be sent to your grave by my enraged self. I will then inscribe a biography on your tombstone, which will say, "Stop." Linda cried sadly, tears streaming down her face. She lowered her head little by little until her forehead touched the ground and cried out, "Master." John pushed the lunchbox in his hand with satisfaction. Watching her wolf down the food, John stroked her head. Sensing the hidden grief and anger in the person before him, he said, "Don't worry, I'm inhuman. I won't set you free until I've completely trained you." As soon as he finished speaking, he felt the delicate body in his hands tremble violently. "Although I won't let you leave, you can tell me what else you want next?" John asked with a smile. Linda paused in her eating, looked up, and said, "A phone, a computer, games. Okay, I understand what you mean. I'll bring you a math book." John nodded. "But..." Linda tried to speak, but John covered her mouth. "With your current performance, this is the only reward I can give you," John said. "If you want something better, we'll see how you perform later." John released his grip, casually removing a grain of rice powder stuck to Linda's face, and then, regardless of her wishes, stuffed it into her mouth. Removing his finger, John reminded her, "Don't think about suicide. Otherwise, once you're resurrected, it won't end so easily. At least simple hunger is still within the range that human will can endure." "Hey," John said, tossing a high-level mathematics book in front of Linda after she finished eating. "Study hard. I'm leaving now. I'll come back to find you tonight. I hope you'll do better then." With that, John picked up his lunchbox, stood up, and walked out of the secret room, slamming the door shut behind him. The secret room fell silent again. Linda looked at everything before her, her beautiful face shifting with emotion, lost in thought. After a long while, she let out a painful sigh. 7 days later, John calmly browsed the knowledge in the mother box before him. Beside him, Supergirl Linda held his right arm, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. After several days of training, Linda's activities had successfully expanded from the secret room to the entire White House. Linda's neck and limbs were bound with wristbands made of a mixture of kryptonite and vibranium to ensure she wouldn't escape John's control. "I want it," John said, his eyes still fixed on the rapidly changing mother box before him. Linda didn't reply, but obediently stood up, walked to John, aimed, and knelt down. John nodded encouragingly, then focused on studying the rapidly flashing content on the mother box. Half an hour later, Asa drenched in sweat finished her battle and slowly crawled away from John. The 3 mother boxes standing side by side before him began to tremble violently. "Oh," at this time? A few years earlier than before, John muttered to himself. Perhaps because he had gathered the 3 mother boxes, Apocalypse could locate this place more easily. But it's perfect timing, just in time to solve the Apocalypse problem, John thought. John had already studied the 3 mother boxes in his hands to a considerable extent. If no one from Apocalypse came in a few days, John planned to set up a reverse portal to get there. Watching the constantly shifting and trembling mother boxes before him, John got up, put on the pants he had just taken off, wiped the water stains on the ground, and then quietly waited for the mother boxes to react. The next moment, a huge, translucent blue beam of light descended from the sky, instantly piercing through the White House in front of him. Chapter 159 Apocalypse. Not far from the White House, Shendu looked at the blue beam of light piercing through it with a puzzled expression. What is His Majesty up to now? Shendu thought to himself. Ever since the Justice League assassinated Homelander, Jason had decided to have at least one of his men guard the vicinity of the White House every day to prevent such a thing from happening again, and today it just so happened to be Shendu's turn. No matter what, I should go and see. Shendu murmured, and floated into the air, flying towards the White House. Inside the White House, the sonic tunnel enveloped the mother box, and dozens of armored, ferocious-looking parademons rushed out of the tunnel, staring intently at the human in front of them with their scarlet eyes. Then, a huge monster, 3 meters tall and made entirely of shimmering silver armor, leaped out of the tunnel, holding a giant axe and staring intently at the small human in front of it. Humans? You're the one who gathered the mother boxes? Steppenwolf looked at the 3 mother boxes in surprise, walking forward step by step, looking down at the humans before him. He hadn't expected that this guy was the one who gathered the 3 mother boxes. Your Majesty, who are these guys? At this moment, Shendu also flew in from outside, looking at the parademons and Steppenwolf and asking, do we need to eliminate the enemy? What kind of monsters are these? Steppenwolf looked at Shendu, who had barged in, with some apprehension. At this moment, compared to Shendu's 5-meter height, the 3-meter-tall Steppenwolf, who was originally considered burly, suddenly looked like a child. Faced with Shendu's question, John nodded slightly, confirming the matter. These guys were the enemy. With John's permission, Shendu looked at the dozens of weaklings before him with his crimson eyes, clenching his fists. He hadn't fought in a long time. Don't kill the big one, the others are fine as they are. Also, be careful not to destroy the surrounding environment, John instructed. Yes, Your Majesty, the Holy Lord replied, his tall figure vanishing from his spot on the next instant, appearing as if teleported behind Steppenwolf. He then turned around and said, Your Majesty, mission accomplished. John rolled his eyes. I can see that. Mission accomplished? Accomplished what? Steppenwolf thought blankly. The next moment, all the parademons along the way exploded, their blood staining the entire hall red. When Steppenwolf came to his senses, he was horrified to find that all 4 of his limbs had been torn apart, the cuts clean and neat. Steppenwolf's torso, now without the support of his limbs, crashed to the ground, his previous arrogance gone, his face filled with pain and horror, unable to understand what had happened in that brief moment. Steppenwolf, right? John stepped forward, stomping on Steppenwolf's wildly heaving chest, and tossed the 3 mother boxes onto his head. If you want to survive and regain your limbs, open the portal to Apocalypse for me. Impossible. Knowing full well that the person before him was no match for Darkseid, Steppenwolf roared, Don't try to threaten me with death. Fine, I'll do it myself. John said calmly, lightly pressing down on Steppenwolf's body as if crushing an ant. Picking up the 3 mother boxes, John looked at the Holy Lord. Have Zod and the others restore the White House damaged by the sonic boom portal. Wipe away all the blood and debris. Remember to finish before I return. Before I return? The Holy Lord asked in confusion. Where are you going, Your Majesty? I'm going on a business trip to Apocalypse for a few days. Remember to bring food to my female slave during these days, don't let her starve to death. John said, and the next moment he disappeared from the White House. Minutes later, on Mars, John held 3 mother boxes in his hands. In the next instant, his figure split into 3, each holding a mother box and chanting ancient incantations. Under his chanting, the 3 mother boxes floated together, the ley lines of the planet beneath their feet transforming into pure golden light that surged into the trembling boxes. Gradually, the 3 mother boxes began to show signs of merging under the pull of gravity. Meanwhile, on Apocalypse, Darkseid sensed the response from the mother boxes and was puzzled. Was Steppenwolf really that fast? He had only just arrived and already collected all 3 mother boxes? However, since there was a response, Darkseid didn't hesitate for long and immediately ordered a space-time portal to the other side to be opened based on the location. The next moment, a pale blue circular space portal slowly unfolded before John. On Apocalypse, Darkseid's gaze pierced through the space-time portal and saw the Trinity chanting incantations to summon the boy on the opposite planet. The question was, where was Steppenwolf? When the spatial passage was only 1 person tall, John, seeing that his goal had been achieved, tore apart the 3 mother boxes that were about to merge into one and instantly rushed into the spatial passage. In the blink of an eye, John rushed into the spatial passage, traversing the galaxy to arrive on Apocalypse. Without the support of the mother boxes, the previously stable passage vanished the moment it appeared. Seeing the constructed passage vanish in an instant, Darkseid's rough, rock-like face darkened instantly. He turned to John and demanded, Human, where is Steppenwolf? And who are you? Steppenwolf is dead, John said indifferently, surveying the unfamiliar star system and the desolate, apocalyptic planet he found himself on. But you still have a chance to survive. He floated in midair, looking down at Darkseid. I'll give you a chance. Be my dog, and then present your forces to me. What did you say? Darkseid's eyes blazed with fury as he stared at this nonsensical human. Do you know who you're talking to? I know, but do you know who you're talking to? John looked down at the ugly figure before him and commented, You little freak. Freak, Darkseid's army below collectively gasped, staring in shock at the figure in the sky. Although their leader was ugly, no one had ever dared to call him that. Sure enough, as soon as he finished speaking, Darkseid's face darkened instantly. He coldly ordered his men, Kill him. I want to decorate my palace with his corpse. Yes, Chief, Darkseid's men immediately nodded, then waved their hands slightly forward. In the blink of an eye, a massive army of parademons charged towards John, attempting to overwhelm him. Millions of parademons roared, flapping their wings like demons unleashed from hell. An ordinary person facing such a charge would be terrified to death with just a glance. But what awaited them was a burst of crimson light from John's eyes. With a mere sweep, millions of parademons were reduced to ashes in an instant. Chapter 160 Occupation and Extraterrestrial Enemies. It seems you haven't grasped the gravity of the situation. Having annihilated a million-strong parademon army, John gently descended from the sky, his eyes fixed on Darkseid. Since you won't obey, then leave only half. Leave half? Darkseid looked warily at the man who had landed on the ground. Was that Kryptonian heat vision just now? But those Kryptonians, those old fogies, went extinct decades ago. Darkseid thought of the millions of parademon soldiers he had just devoured. And even Kryptonians, they're definitely not that strong. Of course, I'll leave you half a planet. John said, raising his right fist, his biofield covering the planet slightly larger than Earth beneath his feet, and then he swung his fist downwards. Boom. In an instant, the half of the planet to John's right was blasted into dust. Sky, earth, ocean, and wood, metal, plastic, all were reduced to the most basic dust by John's single punch, then coalesced again under the planet's gravity. To John's left, protected by a biofield, the planet suffered little damage beyond violent tremors and cracked earth. From John's position, the planet appeared to be divided into two distinct halves from the outer sky. Now, can you kneel down and be my dogs? John looked at the petrified Darkseid and his army. If you don't want all life on the remaining half of this planet to disappear as well. Who are you? Darkseid struggled to maintain his balance, trying not to be outmaneuvered. Me? John's lips curled slightly. You can call me Homelander. Homelander? The remaining Legion members chanted the name. I need you to hand over all the technological accumulation Apocalypse has accumulated over the years. John looked impatiently at the ugly creatures before him. I don't want to waste any more time with you freaks. 2 days later, within the Marvel Universe, a violent energy fluctuation emanated from near a star. Jason, having ended his vacation, rushed to the research lab and asked, what happened? More people from another world have arrived. That's right, the female version of Dr. Octopus said, adjusting her glasses slightly. A terrifying surge of energy just came from near the star. Calculations show it could instantly evaporate an entire planet. Not only that, she added, if that energy were released as a wave, it could instantly shatter 1% of the sun's volume. Jason's face paled. According to the Holy Lord's report, John wasn't on Earth at the moment, he was off on Apocalypse. He had previously been just an agent, and his current high position was a gift from John. This sudden crisis had thrown him into disarray. Just as Jason was at his wit's end, former Vice President Rodriguez, a man with a proper academic background, stepped forward and ordered, go to the time collider immediately, enter the parallel universe, close the time portal, and wait for His Majesty to return. At the same time, send someone to find Doctor Strange immediately and ask him for the next strategy. He has the time stone, he knows far more than we do. Do as Rodriguez says immediately, Jason told the official beside him. The man nodded hastily and ran off to issue the orders. As they spoke, an orange portal appeared beside them, and Strange emerged, saying, no need to look anymore, I'm here. You've come at the right time. Do you have a plan? Rodriguez breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing Doctor Strange. No need to rush. Just enter the parallel universe as we just discussed. Doctor Strange, his eyes glowing green as he held a time stone, said, I'll make sure that guy meets Homelander. But, can His Majesty defeat him? A few of them were uncertain. A mere fluctuation of energy could destroy 1% of the sun. Could His Majesty, with his current strength, possibly defeat it at full power? Perhaps we should send His Majesty to a parallel world to recuperate for a few months. Rodriguez hesitated, until we're fully prepared before we fight. As John's confidants, they naturally understood the purpose of the nuclear fusion reactor, built with 30% of the Earth Federation's manpower. However, potential was potential. In their current understanding, John could only move planets. Compared to the newly emerged being capable of destroying the sun, the gap was enormous. After all, the sun's mass was hundreds of thousands of times that of Earth, accounting for 99.86% of the entire star system's mass, and destroying the sun would be hundreds or even thousands of times more difficult. Homelander's current strength was still too weak. Strange smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, my eyes can see the future. That guy is manageable for Homelander." "Really?" The group hesitated, unsure of their own abilities. Still believing in the power of the Time Stone, Rodriguez nodded heavily and said, "I understand. I'll have all the officials enter the parallel world of the space-time collision immediately." Because of John's previous Wandering Earth plan, the Federation members on Marvel Earth had already been gradually brought into the parallel world a few days in advance, leaving only the officials and a few citizens who didn't want to leave. Therefore, the evacuation of the officials went exceptionally smoothly this time. With the help of magical slaves, the evacuation was completed in minutes, and then, to the bewildered expressions of those citizens who wanted to stay, the space-time collider was completely shut down, sealing off the parallel universe. Watching the light of the space-time collision disappear before his eyes, Strange directly drew a special portal based on his memories and image of John, and appeared on Apocalypse the next moment. At this moment, John was reclining on a throne on Apocalypse, while Darkseid and the others stood respectfully to the side, like children being punished for doing something wrong. "What are you doing here? Is there some insurmountable crisis on Earth again?" John asked Doctor Strange as he walked out of the spatial portal. Doctor Strange nodded. "This is a bit tricky." "Oh." John raised an eyebrow, a strange light appearing in his eyes. He finally showed some interest. "The enemy is very strong. In your future words, it's interesting. Their ultimate attack is about 1,000 times stronger than mine now," Doctor Strange repeated. Oh. Hearing Doctor Strange's description, John roughly understood the seriousness of the situation. He waved his hand slightly and said, "I understand. Go and make the arrangements. Bring him to me, and leave the rest to me." "Okay." Doctor Strange nodded, then stepped back into the portal to make the necessary arrangements. Chapter 161 The Demon Emperor. On the desolate planet Apocalypse, after Doctor Strange left, Darkseid respectfully asked, "Your Majesty, who is that guy just now?" "A friend. You can continue standing here as punishment. I have something to attend to and will be leaving for a while," John said with a slight wave of his hand, offering no further explanation. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished from the throne. After John left, Darkseid's previously respectful expression immediately darkened. He looked at his subordinate and asked, "How much longer until the fleet arrives?" Apocalypse's chief scientist, Dizid, respectfully replied, reporting to the leader, "The fleet of over 1,000 ships equipped with planetary annihilation cannons departed 2 days ago. At the speed of their light-speed engines, they should arrive in our star system in just half an hour." "Very good. I will definitely grind this Kryptonian to dust," Darkseid said fiercely. "Don't think you're the only one who can destroy planets. Kryptonians are all ancient relics. What era are we living in? Still comparing martial arts and weapons?" As a major power ruling across intergalactic regions, Apocalypse naturally possessed weapons capable of annihilating planets. These weapons, which extract stellar energy, could wipe out not only Earth, but even half of Jupiter with a single full power shot. However, due to the need for conquest and the fear of a rebellion that might target Apocalypse with these planetary annihilation cannons, Darkseid usually dispatched these legions outside his own star system, rarely returning unless absolutely necessary. This resulted in John encountering no significant resistance against this intergalactic civilization when he ruled Apocalypse. It was simply too risky to deploy such powerful weapons in his own base. Furthermore, Darkseid's physical strength was among the best in the universe, and he hadn't anticipated that a higher version of Kryptonians from another parallel universe would attack him. A few minutes earlier, in the Marvel main universe, at the edge of a star, a tall, slender man in a black robe, wielding a black spear, and with handsome features, suddenly appeared beside the star. Upon appearing, the man in the black robe maintained an attack stance, thrusting his spear forward sharply. A terrifying energy surge immediately erupted from the spear tip, shaking the star before him. The previously stable star began to tremble violently due to the intense energy. The surging energy could shatter Earth countless times in an instant. "What's going on? Where am I?" The handsome man stared at the violently fluctuating surface of the star before him. Is this the power of Lindong, the ancestor of new life, or the methods of the symbol ancestor? HMPH, cunning tricks. Looking at the boundless starry sky before him, the man sneered, "Unable to confront me, the Demon Emperor, head on, you resort to such underhanded methods?" The Demon Emperor's eyes flashed like lightning, his gaze sweeping across the planets throughout the solar system. He quickly sensed the presence of life on a distant, vibrant planet. Let's go rule that place first. The Demon Emperor gazed at the distant planet, then in the blink of an eye, his figure transformed into a streak of light, hurtling towards Earth at near light speed. Minutes later, as he approached the planet, a hint of disdain flashed in his eyes upon seeing that it lacked even a single being at the life-profound mirror level. Without any intention of slowing down, the Demon Emperor simply entered the atmosphere, the powerful impact instantly altering the fragile planet's shape. Towering tsunamis and earthquakes instantly swept the globe, unleashing a catastrophe capable of wiping out humanity, wiping out 90% of the species within its ecosystem in just a few minutes. Truly fragile creatures. Looking at the massive population wiped out in an instant, the Demon Emperor sneered. At this moment, the Demon Emperor wasn't worried about the consequences of wiping out the humanity of his planet, because he could already see the spatial portals on distant planets. But the next moment, the Demon Emperor's expression turned slightly cold, because 7 or 8 of the spatial portals had been completely sealed off. Or rather, nested within the spatial portals. Inside the portals, magical slaves, wearing sling rings, at the official's request, drew another spatial passage through the existing connection to another world. The orange spatial portal that appeared immediately blocked the pale blue spatial passage in front of them completely. Anyone trying to pass through the pale blue interdimensional passage would only exit the Marvel Universe through the portal created by the sling rings, unable to enter the interdimensional space at all. A clever trick. Looking at the 7 or 8 blocked spatial passages, the Demon Emperor sneered and casually swung his spear. In the blink of an eye, the planet beneath his feet instantly turned to dust. Even the aftershocks surged into the dozen or so unsealed interdimensional passages, causing a hydrogen bomb-like explosion on the other side. In an instant, massive destruction occurred in those interdimensional passages that had not yet been discovered by the Earth Federation. The terrifying explosive power caught the government on the other side off guard, and they immediately dispatched their troops to investigate the cause of the explosion after it subsided. After erasing Earth, the Demon Emperor turned and charged into the spatial passages, but on the other side, an orange passage silently appeared, and a man in a red robe blocked his way. "Friend from another dimension, please wait." Doctor Strange looked at the man in front of him with a strange smile. "And who are you?" The Demon Emperor stared at the orange passage behind Doctor Strange, which was exactly the same as the sealed spaces. "Did you bring me here?" "It wasn't me, but I know why you came here." Doctor Strange bowed to the otherworldly emperor before him, then briefly explained the matter of the interdimensional intrusion. "So, I can't go back?" The otherworldly emperor frowned, looking at the man from another dimension. "Unless a spatial portal to your world appears, that's basically it." Doctor Strange nodded. "However, compared to going back, what you should do now, my friend, is deal with the big trouble you're in right now." "Big trouble?" The otherworldly emperor frowned. "How so?" "The planet you destroyed was ruled by a super-powerful being. If he finds out, you'll be in big trouble." Doctor Strange shook his head and sighed. "Oh, a super-powerful being?" The otherworldly emperor scoffed. "How powerful?" "He can destroy a planet beneath his feet with the same ease as you." Doctor Strange chuckled. The otherworldly emperor looked down at the small mound beneath his feet. He could crush 10,000 of these things himself, so he confidently said. "If this is all the overlord you're talking about, then he's still somewhat inferior to me. Tell me his location." Chapter 162, A Million-Fold Strength Boost. Hearing the otherworldly emperor's words, Doctor Strange advised, "Absolutely not, my friend. Your strengths are evenly matched. Fighting will only result in mutual destruction, which will do you no good." But in an instant, the otherworldly emperor pressed his spear against his throat. "I don't need you to teach me how to do things." "Fine," Doctor Strange sighed. "I'll open a spatial portal to a star system for you. Go find him yourself. You're smart enough." The otherworldly emperor withdrew his spear, coldly staring at Doctor Strange. Forced into a corner, Doctor Strange sighed, and with his slingshot on his hand, he drew a spatial portal emitting orange sparks. The otherworldly emperor, having seen this move many times, narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking, "This is a good ability. After killing that so-called enemy, I'll make him pass on his techniques to me." As the spatial portal opened, the opposite side was a dark void of space. "That's the star system where beings of your level reside," Doctor Strange said, the immense suction of the vacuum of space causing his robes to flutter loudly. an existence of the same level. A dark, indescribable glint flashed in the eyes of the Otherworld Emperor. The more Doctor Strange said this, the more he wanted to trample the so-called equal powerhouse under his feet. "If you don't want to die, wait for me here," the Otherworld Emperor threatened, then rushed into the portal. Watching the Otherworld Emperor leave, Doctor Strange breathed a sigh of relief. After 327 rehearsals and over 1,000 changes to his lines, he had finally managed to fool this guy. Then, with a wave of his hand, Doctor Strange caused the special passage in front of him to disappear instantly. As for the Otherworld Emperor's threat, he'd deal with it after he survived Homelander's attack. On the other side, the Otherworld Emperor had just rushed into the special passage. Looking at the void before him, before he could even feel anything, a gigantic hand, 20 meters thick, swept towards him. What the hell? The Otherworld Emperor was startled, but the next moment he was grabbed without any way to avoid it and thrown at near light speed into a distant, burning star. Boom! With a deafening roar, the body of the Otherworldly Emperor slammed into the star system, creating a crater the size of Jupiter. The force of the impact caused the Otherworldly Emperor to cough up a mouthful of blood. Is this a powerhouse of the same level as NM? Recalling Doctor Strange's words, the Otherworldly Emperor roared in disbelief, feeling completely manipulated. In the sky, John watched the enraged man on the burning star with utter indifference, as if he were looking at a struggling ant. At this moment, his height had increased 100-fold, reaching 180 meters. On his right arm was a massive wristwatch, the PIM device. As a bug-level piece of equipment in the Marvel Universe, it could shrink objects and enlarge them, maintaining its stability without adhering to the law of conservation of energy during the enlargement process. Just as some hypothetical scenario suggests, an ant can lift creatures tens of thousands of times its own weight. If it reached the size of a human, wouldn't it evolve into a terrifying biological weapon capable of wielding tens of tons with a mere wave of its hand? But reality isn't a simple matter of addition. An ant's body structure dictates that if it were to grow to human size, it would ultimately be crushed by the weight of its own body under the gravity of the planet it supports, unable even to crawl. However, PIM particles don't follow the rules of physics, or rather, as a result of PIM's research into quantum mechanics, previously established physics rules cannot limit them. At this moment, John is simultaneously stretched 100-fold in length, width, and height by PIM particles, and the stellar energy within his body is also proportionally amplified. Therefore, he isn't simply enhanced 100-fold, but rather to the cube of 100, his strength increasing 1,000,000-fold, as if he's been given a cheat code. So what if you're 1,000 times stronger than me? John's gaze fell upon the Demon Emperor within the star. Which of the powerful beings in the multiverse didn't rise to power through cheat codes? You don't even have any cheat codes, how dare you play with me? Sensing the contemptuous gaze in the void and personally experiencing that extreme, pure power, the Demon Emperor knew that if he didn't go all out, he would surely die. The next moment, he roared furiously at the distant giant, sacrifice. Monument. For the Demon Emperor, this was indeed a complete and utter sacrifice. He not only used all his energy but also completely sacrificed his physical body, leaving only a single demonic eye fixedly staring at the giant in the sky. This method, which almost exhausted his very essence, was practically a fantasy version of the heavenly demon disintegration technique. It would take thousands of years to recover, but in order to survive from that powerful enemy in the distance, he had no choice but to risk his life. The ultimate sacrifice brought the ultimate reward. A 1,000,000-foot-tall phantom of a demonic monument immediately appeared in the sky. The instant the demonic monument appeared, a deep roar echoed throughout the entire star system, the primordial demonic monument, the seal of 10,000 demons. Fancy. Watching the Demon Emperor struggle, John commented softly. All that effort, and he'd only increased his power tenfold, and could only unleash one move. The next moment, propelled by a bioforce field 1,000,000 times stronger, his speed reached near light speed. With this extreme speed, no fancy techniques were needed, pure power could easily obliterate everything before him. Boom. Propelled by near light speed, John's body slammed into the ancient demonic monument. The massive monument couldn't even withstand John's slightest speed before being pierced. In an instant, John's body pierced through the primordial demonic monument, the primal demonic eye, and the massive star 1.5 million kilometers in diameter, all in a straight line. With the destruction of the primordial demonic monument, the Demon Emperor's true essence dissipated, the entire star shattered, and surging energy began to sweep outwards across the entire star system. Instant kill. A pure annihilation. With PIM particles activated, John's current surge in pure power completely overwhelmed the Demon Emperor. Faced with a power difference of tens of thousands of times, it would be a miracle if the Demon Emperor even survived a second attack. And some small fry. John's gaze swept towards the thousands of fleets propelled by light-speed engines approaching from outside the star system. Ultimately, just a bunch of ungrateful wretches. John said calmly. He was well aware of the fleet's purpose. They simply believed they could retaliate because they possessed the immense energy capable of annihilating star systems. Just laughable delusions of the weak. John commented, observing the large fleet in the distance. However, since he had already thoroughly studied Apocalypse technology over the past few days, these traitors were no longer necessary. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Stellar Annihilation Bomb. The moment after sentencing the distant fleet to death, John gently raised his right hand, and a giant red blood cell, magnified by PIM particles and measuring 0.7 millimeters, floated in the center of his palm, which was several meters wide. A massive bioforce field was released from John's body, instantly enveloping the shattered star fragments. Under John's control, the surging stellar energy savagely gathered towards him. Or rather, the object of this gathering was the 0.7 millimeter sized red blood cell in John's hand. Having spent so long on Apocalypse, John naturally understood the principle behind their so-called planetary annihilation cannons created by absorbing stellar energy. And this red blood cell in his palm, under his current atomic level biofield, could easily be modified internally to absorb stellar energy. In addition, Kryptonian cells, as natural stellar energy absorbers, quickly began to expand violently outward like inflating a balloon when faced with the influx of stellar energy. Even John, now a million times stronger, could not directly absorb and digest the energy contained in an entire star, let alone a single cell within his body. In the blink of an eye, under extreme pressure, the red blood cell swelled into a sphere of light the size of a normal human eyeball, radiating brightness equivalent to the surface of over 100,000 suns, before being twisted and swallowed up again. The extreme energy of the star that had just shattered had all poured into the cell, leaving only a cold, dead core. At this moment, the sphere of light in John's hand was countless times larger in mass than a black hole of the same size. With this level of energy exploding, even if I were hit by it now, it's hard to say whether I could survive, John thought, and then silently released the sphere of light in his hand. Having absorbed the energy of an entire star, I'll call it the Stellar Annihilation Bomb. If you can survive in this star system, I won't pursue the matter, John thought, and quickly created a spatial portal, rushing inside, leaving only the sphere of light behind. The next moment, without the biofield's coverage, the sphere of light containing the energy of an entire star rippled slightly, first collapsing inward into a tiny point, then suddenly releasing extreme light and heat outward. A terrifying wave of destruction began to sweep across the entire planetary system, the terrifying energy flow surpassing that of a supernova explosion surging and wreaking havoc. If all planets within its blast radius were destroyed, absolutely no planet could survive within the 1.5 light-year diameter planetary system. Apocalypse, the closest planet, bore the brunt of the attack, being struck at point-blank range by the terrifying energy. Darkseid didn't even have time to react before being destroyed along with his arriving fleet. Within the planetary system containing Apocalypse, besides this drained star, there were 8 dwarf planets, 12 planets, 600,000 asteroids, and 94 moons, with the largest diameter approximately 1.5 light-years. These planets will be destroyed by the energy of the stellar annihilation bombs over the next 2 to 3 years. Even with some energy reduction, within a 50 light-year radius, it will completely extinguish life on all inhabited planets across approximately 20,000 planetary systems. Of course, that's decades or even centuries from now, and has no impact on John, who has returned to Earth. On Earth, after the attack by the otherworldly Emperor, the planets have been reduced to cosmic dust and then reassembled under gravity. However, he didn't care. He lightly clicked a button on his arm, and his body returned to normal. The feeling of omnipotence brought by his sudden increase in power vanished instantly. Using his supervision, his gaze instantly pierced through spatial portals, quickly finding the world where Doctor Strange was. With a swift movement, he rushed into that world and met Doctor Strange, who had been waiting for 2 minutes. I feel like I'm getting faster and faster at everything except sex, John thought inexplicably. Moreover, if desired, it could be done quickly. For example, the current biofield could even achieve a time-stopping effect, simultaneously dehydrating and rendering 100,000 women unconscious within a second. After 2 months of cooperation, Doctor Strange had become completely accustomed to Homelander's efficient work style. He smiled and asked, "Solved?" "Solved." That guy was quite dangerous, John nodded seriously. He couldn't defeat him in his normal state. If the Otherworld Emperor had arrived at John's side during the teleportation, and was in the state of preparing to use the primal monument on Lindong, even he would have a chance of dying instantly. And if the guy who teleported this time is hundreds of thousands of times stronger than the Otherworld Emperor, and I can't deal with him even with Pym particles, then it's dangerous, John thought to himself. Dangerous my foot, Doctor Strange thought to himself upon hearing John's words. In the future he saw, Homelander had one trump card after another, and even without Pym particles, he had all sorts of explosive methods. The most terrifying thing is that more than 2 months have passed since the war on Earth, and Thanos and Boros have long since found and handed over the Soul Stone and the Reality Stone. In other words, apart from the Time Stone, which is still useful and hasn't been taken, the other 5 Infinity Stones are all stuck in John's special ring. If he encounters an enemy he can't defeat, he can easily gather the power of all 6 stones in a few dozen seconds. At that point, Homelander could reduce the universe to dust with a snap of his fingers. And yet, you say it's dangerous when you're fighting an enemy that barely reaches the star level? What a joke. Suppressing his urge to complain, Doctor Strange smiled and said, "What are you going to do now? You're becoming more and more like your master." Looking at Doctor Strange's enigmatic smile, John smirked, but there's still a difference. If it were the Ancient One, knowing the outcome, she wouldn't even ask this question. Hearing John's words, Doctor Strange's smile faltered. He could only say that possessing the Time Stone and having the future under his control had made him somewhat addicted, leading to some changes in his personality. Next, of course, is to give me the Time Stone. I'll restore Earth first. John waved to Doctor Strange. Okay. Doctor Strange didn't hesitate. The glow in his eyes faded, and with a flick of his wrist, a jade green gem rolled down from his chest pendant, floated in his hand, and was handed over. Chapter 164 Infinite Terror. John took the gem from Strange's hand, gripping it tightly. A violent surge of magical energy erupted as he cast a regional time reversal spell. In the blink of an eye, time on Earth and the Marvel Universe began to rewind, massive amounts of matter began to reassemble and then be restored to an orderly state. Even the damage beneath John's feet caused by the aftershocks of Earth's destruction was repaired. It took several minutes in total, and Earth returned to its pristine state before the arrival of the otherworldly Emperor. The hundreds of millions of people who had died were resurrected by the magic of time. Releasing his grip, John looked at the gem in his palm without hesitation, casually tossing it to Strange, who caught it carefully. "That's all for now. Contact me next time you need anything." John waved to Strange and turned to leave, preparing to return to the DC universe. But just before leaving, he glanced back at the planet in the alternate dimension and let out a soft exclamation of surprise. Is this really the world? John's gaze pierced through thousands of miles to the options on the computer screen in the distance. Which version of Infinite Terror is this? Whatever. John scoffed. At worst, he'd be blasted to smithereens. What was there to be afraid of? Strange, seeing John frozen in place, didn't speak. He simply drew a circle and silently left. He had other matters to attend to. Ignoring Strange's departure, the moment John saw the option on the computer screen, he prepared to conquer the planet beneath his feet. As the aftershocks of the explosion near the portal dissipated, this counterintuitive and bizarre scene put all the nations on Earth on high alert. Large teams of research and security personnel were quickly mobilized, donning protective suits and approaching the location. Looking at the restored city and the seemingly normal crowd, the sense of unease in their hearts grew stronger. This city was clearly destroyed in that bombing. It's like time has reversed, and these people have no idea they just died? A researcher felt a chill run down his spine. The weather was fine, but he felt a cold shiver. Not only were they astonished, But the surrounding resurrected crowd also stared in surprise at the group of people in protective suits, as if they were filming a movie, even looking around to see if there were any cameras. One American even walked up to them, curiously asking, "Hey, friend, are you filming a movie? The costumes and props are really realistic. What's the movie called?" Seeing the man who had spoken to him, James seized the opportunity to ask, "I'd like to know, what strange thing happened just now?" "Strange thing? You guys are strange enough," the passerby said with amusement, then shook his head and turned away. Seeing the curious stares from those around them, they immediately ordered questioning of everyone in the vicinity, but after questioning everyone, they found that no one had any memory of their death. After a fruitless investigation, researcher James complained, "Damn it, where's the explosion? Surely nothing really happened?" Just then, he noticed a significant shift in the crowd's flow. Everyone was rushing towards one spot. He quickly stopped a passerby and asked, "Hey, friend, what's going on?" The passerby looked at the group in protective suits with surprise but explained, "Someone's filming over there. They've built a portal, like in a sci-fi movie, and the president even has a cameo." "A cameo?" James was taken aback. They'd come here on the president's orders, hadn't they? Had the president gotten ahead of them? But at the same time, an intuition told him that if they follow the crowd, they'd definitely find out the truth. "Follow them immediately," James ordered. The investigation team immediately rushed towards the crowd and found the portal completely surrounded by onlookers. Upon seeing the pale blue portal, reminiscent of something out of a science fiction movie, James's attention was almost entirely captured. Several seconds later, his gaze finally settled on the portal's vicinity. There, he saw a boy more handsome than a movie star sitting cross-legged in a chair, surrounded by anxious heads of state. The investigation team's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. The US President, the British Prime Minister, the French President, all the world's most renowned leaders were gathered before that portal, their expressions incredibly restrained, looking like submissive wives before the boy. While James was still in shock, the other investigators stepped forward, urgently asking, "President, what are you doing here?" "Shut up. All of you, stand aside," the president snapped, "don't disturb the esteemed leader's thoughts." He then glanced at the boy, and only then did the investigators notice a patch of roasted meat not far from the boy's feet. Cold sweat poured down the forehead of this world's US president. Just moments ago, he was in the White House, but the next instant, his surroundings changed, and he was dragged here. Here, he saw other world leaders looking equally bewildered, and a young man sitting with his legs crossed in front of him. This surreal ability and the environment made everyone realize the gravity of the situation. The leaders exchanged glances, and one of them immediately tried to leave, but before he could take more than a few steps, the impatient young man glared at him and turned him into roasted mincemeat on the ground. "Don't try to be clever. I don't want to waste my time on you," the young man coldly warned the others after glaring at the leader. At that moment, as the investigators hesitated between listening to the president and arresting the young man, an orange halo unfolded before them. This futuristic scene startled the surrounding crowd, causing them to recoil. The halo remained within a 5-meter radius, and then a large group of fully armed individuals poured out, including several enormous, clearly inhuman creatures. "They're here," John said calmly, opening his eyes as the halo opened. "Yes, Your Majesty, the Sorcerer Supreme has already told us the basic situation," Jason nodded. "Then you shall bring this planet under your control." John slowly rose from his chair, then stretched lightly. "I've brought all these leaders with me. I don't need to teach you what to do I?" Jason nodded knowingly twice. "I may disappear for a few months," John instructed. "If you encounter any difficult enemies, have Strange come to me." Chapter 165 Instructions and Departure. "Your Majesty, you're leaving?" Jason and the others exclaimed in shock upon hearing John's words. Strange had only mentioned that Homelander had dealt with the enemy and Earth had returned to normal, and they were still amazed by Homelander's power. Now, he was saying he was leaving. Everyone was thrown into chaos, unsure what to do, because they knew the Earth Federation still needed Homelander to maintain order. The Earth Federation had always been a Frankenstein's monster, forcibly assembled by Homelander's immense power. People of different religions, cultures, beliefs, races, and social systems, all simplified under Homelander's strength and the idea of equality, became John's lackeys. In the Earth Federation, everyone was explicitly told on the day they joined that their race and personality didn't matter. From that day on, They only needed to remember they were His Majesty's dogs. That would be their greatest protection. This equality wasn't because these people were inherently virtuous enough to appreciate equality, but because they knew Homelander enjoyed seeing them feign mutual deference. The reason the Earth Federation is able to maintain strict laws and prevent crime isn't because of smart terminals, but because of Homelander's supervision, a vision that allows him to see everything clearly, making every citizen feel like Homelander is watching them all the time. If the Earth Federation were to completely lose Homelander, the higher-ups would start fighting amongst themselves within a day, with many researching how to hack into smart terminals and rewrite their programs. Within a week, a privileged class would emerge, controlling the smart terminals, and one race would rise to power, oppressing others. Within a month, the Earth Federation would begin to split, returning to its previous state of fragmented governance, then turning on each other, with the losers becoming slaves. It's not that Homelander needs the Earth Federation, but that the Earth Federation needs Homelander. Well, you don't need to continue building nuclear fusion reactors anymore. John naturally understood their ulterior motives and said calmly, "Don't worry, I won't completely abandon you. You just need to strictly follow my instructions to operate the Empire. Don't mess around just because I'm not here. If I return and use the time stone to see anyone going too far, you should know what will happen." John glanced at the Holy Lord and then disappeared. "His Majesty has left," the Holy Lord asked somewhat guiltily. Jason nodded slightly, then said, "Let's carry out His Majesty's orders. Let's start by conquering this planet. A few months should be enough for us to conquer 100 worlds, making it a lucky number." As he spoke, Rodriguez smiled and walked towards the heads of state of various countries, asking, "Have you heard of the Earth Federation?" In a parallel world, John suddenly rips open a spatial passage with a diameter of over 300,000 kilometers, and a huge planet was pushed in by John's lifting. Then came the second, the third. Under John's movements, one after another planet conquered by the Earth Federation was stuffed into this universe. John stopped after stuffing in the 25th planet, then slightly adjusted the position of each planet to prevent their trajectories from being disrupted and causing them to collide. In a middle school in a parallel universe, it was dismissal time. Penny, carrying her school bag, walked away with the flow of people heading home. "Where am I going after school today?" Penny looked down at the ground, her mind drifting to, "Maybe I should go play at Aunt Liv's house." "Hey, Penny, that's not the way home." Just as Penny was thinking, a teasing voice rang in her ear. Hearing the familiar voice, the girl instinctively turned her head and saw a boy wearing sunglasses, hands in his pockets, leaning against the wall, a slight smile on his face as he looked at her. "John!" Penny exclaimed, rushing forward and hugging the boy tightly, then looking up expectantly. "You're not leaving this time, are you?" John shook his head somewhat awkwardly, bending slightly to place his hand on the girl's hair apologetically. "This time I might be gone for a little longer." "Oh." Penny drawled in disappointment, the expectation in her eyes fading. "But I happen to be free these few days," John said with a smile. "These 3 days are yours to do as you please." "Really?" Penny's eyes suddenly lit up, like two suns leaping out. "When have I ever lied to you?" John retorted. "Where's our first stop?" "The amusement park." "I want to go to the amusement park," Penny exclaimed excitedly, clinging to John's right arm. Before she finished speaking, 2 amusement park tickets appeared in John's hand. "How's the recent Eris amusement park? If you don't like it, we can go to the Radiant amusement park on the next planet. Its facilities are probably the most complete in the entire Earth Federation." "Eris amusement park is fine," Penny said contentedly, taking the tickets from John. Meanwhile, inside a villa more than 10 kilometers away, John, holding Linda's kryptonite collar, said to Hellish Snow, "Hey, this is the slave I just acquired, but I haven't had time to train him yet. Keep an eye on him for me. You've been out partying for over 2 months, and you come back with a female slave?" Hellish Snow crossed her arms, somewhat displeased, then looked John up and down suspiciously. "What's going on here?" "I can't help it. Penny needs me, and you guys need me to satisfy you," John said helplessly, forced to keep going back and forth at an extremely high frequency. "So, you're planning to?" Hellish Blizzard's peach blossom eyes flashed with a hint of allure as she reached out her hand, only to have it grabbed. Faced with Hellish Blizzard's request, John, unusually, shook his head. "Tonight, I'm with Penny over there right now. You can't expect me to be stiff the whole time I go to the amusement park with her, can you?" I have to maintain my image in front of that girl, okay? Hellish Blizzard's eyes lit up, a mischievous smile on her face. So, you can't get hard right now? John's face darkened. What did she mean by can't get hard? She was clearly just too embarrassed to get hard. But the next moment, on the way to the amusement park, John's body stiffened, and he bent over slightly, having been caught red-handed by Hellish Blizzard. John, what's wrong? Penny asked curiously, noticing the slowing pace of the person beside her. John forced a smile and gritted his teeth. Nothing, let's keep going. He had really sacrificed too much to keep Penny's innocent heart pure. Hellish Blizzard, if I don't dehydrate you 10 or 8 times tonight, I'll consider you a man of strong will, John thought fiercely to himself. Chapter 166 OAA. On the original Earth in a parallel world, while John was accompanying Penny to an amusement park, in the Marvel universe of the main universe, a blonde man suddenly appeared on a bustling street. The street was filled with humans preparing to relocate. Having just been informed by the Earth Federation that they had died once, the Earthlings were filled with lingering fear. They were all preparing to leave through a portal created by magical slaves. Homesickness was non-existent compared to life. But all of this was interrupted the moment the blonde man appeared. With just his sheer physical mass, the entire Marvel universe began to tremble violently in an instant. The vast universe couldn't even contain the blonde man's physical presence, and it was on the verge of collapsing under the pressure. Where is this? Such a fragile world, unable to even contain my existence. Is it the lower realm? The man wondered slightly, then released his divine sense, sweeping across the entire universe in an instant. Interdimensional space. Homelander. Marvel. DC. He deciphered and read all sorts of information, but in the next instant, an invisible aura spread towards him across infinitely diverse universes. The man, capable of destroying even universes, was instantly on high alert, but before he could react, the aura enveloped him, vanishing from the universe before he could even react. After taking the blonde man away, the aura didn't disappear, it lingered for a fleeting moment, completely restoring the universe beneath his feet to its state before the blonde man's arrival. The previously obliterated streets reappeared, and no one knew that such a terrifying event had just occurred. Outside the Marvel omnipotent universe, in an endless space, the blonde man's figure suddenly appeared. Recalling the unparalleled aura from before, the man was on high alert, but when he looked up, he saw an extremely shocking scene. Around him, one after another, beings with terrifying auras, just like him, suddenly appeared in this infinitely vast space. Among these terrifying beings were colossal Ouroboros whose size could burst the universe, an unknown man endlessly splitting outwards, and a powerful being capable of pulverizing him with a mere wave of his hand. Within this boundless space, every being surrounding the blonde man possessed at least the power to destroy a multiverse, yet they were all captured and brought here like dumplings being dropped into a pot. What happened? What happened? Where is this? Roar. Various sounds filled this white, desolate space, but the blonde man discovered something even more terrifying. His power was plummeting at an unimaginable speed. High-level multiverse, super multiverse, multiverse, super single, single. Within mere seconds, his power began to decline at an alarming rate. Filled with extreme fear, before his power broke through the floor, the man desperately looked around. The colossal serpent that could have destroyed the universe has vanished, and only a handful of the endlessly splitting men remain. After the blonde man's power completely disappeared, his lifespan, consciousness, and even the concept of existence were drained away. Finally, his body collapsed into a cube the size of a thumb and was transported to another space. Before his consciousness completely faded, the last thing the man saw was himself in a huge warehouse, neatly filled with cubes like himself. Each cube was engraved with a number. And the blonde man's cube was marked 350,384,705,721. If John were here, he might understand the question that had been weighing on his mind. What was the OAA's attitude towards the interdimensional invasion, as the apparent ruler of the Marvel Universe? Even the Ancient One was so concerned about the interdimensional invasion, even seeking John as a safeguard for his universe to ensure the continuation of humanity. There's no reason why the OAA wouldn't care. After all, the Marvel Universe is nominally his private property. If John were to witness this scene, he would understand that it wasn't that the OAA was indifferent, but rather that those of lower rank were outside his jurisdiction. He only dealt with beings of the multiverse or higher who had reached the Marvel Universe. Any extra-dimensional being of the multiverse or higher, upon appearing in the Marvel Universe, would be detected by the OAA and ruthlessly taken away, stripped of all abilities, and reduced to a pure cube. Of course, not all beings of the multiverse or higher were taken away by the OAA. As long as you could survive the OAA's attacks, you could roam freely in the Marvel Universe, but currently, there were only 2 such extra-dimensional beings in the Marvel Universe. As for those above the OAA, none had appeared yet, but if one were to appear in the future, it could be a massive catastrophe for the entire Marvel Universe. In the early morning, Penny's consciousness gradually awoke from her slumber, and she instinctively reached for her side, only to find it empty. Penny's lips twitched slightly, but knowing that 3 days had passed and John had kept his promise to leave, she could only accept it, though reluctant. Just then, gently turning her head, she noticed a sticky note with a string of numbers written on it beside her pillow. It looked like a phone number, and the message after the number read, "A 15th birthday present for Penny, our little angel, a month in advance. Your Majesty, what is this?" Puzzled, Penny took out her phone and entered the number. After a busy signal, the call was quickly answered. A slightly aged female voice said, "This is May Riley Parker." "Who is this?" Hearing that familiar voice she hadn't heard in so long, the girl immediately understood the truth. The emotion she had suppressed because of John's departure could no longer be contained, and she covered her mouth and sobbed. "This? Penny? Is this Penny?" the aged female voice on the other end of the line exclaimed excitedly. Penny nodded repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. "Aunt May, it's me. I thought I'd never see you again. Where have you been for the past 7 days? I couldn't find you anywhere," Aunt May sighed. But then there was a knock at the door, and a voice came through the phone to Penny's ear. "Earth Federation, open the door, Census." Coming, Aunt May called from the other end of the line, taking her phone and heading to the door. As she walked, she said, "You probably don't know, but last night the entire Earth was invaded by the Earth Federation from a parallel universe. Now they're starting to install something called a smart terminal in every house. Penny, Aunt May doesn't seem to know I'm dead. Maybe I shouldn't remind her." Chapter 167 First entry into the Central Plains team. John spent 3 days in the parallel universe, indulging in a carefree rest, before deciding to resume his journey. If my predictions are correct, completing the World of Infinite Terror will greatly enhance my strength, John thought. After bidding farewell to Penny, the severely dehydrated hellish blizzard, and others, he arrived on Earth in the Infinite Terror universe through a time portal. This planet had already been incorporated into the Earth Federation, and smart terminals were being distributed to everyone. Let me see where to insert into the god space first. John's supervision pierced through the entire planet. On the other side of Earth, he saw a chubby boy staring blankly at the options on his computer screen, his mouse instinctively clicking the yes option. "I don't think you'd want to click that," a calm voice sounded behind him, startling the chubby boy, who quickly turned around to see a teenager standing in his house. You're trespassing," the chubby boy exclaimed in fear. "Leo, right? You're lucky you ran into me this time." John pressed a smart terminal against the chubby boy's arm. The chubby boy took a step back in fright, then looked at his hand. "What? Huh? A smart terminal? A level 3 access right away? With your aptitude, you wouldn't be able to get that in less than 10 years of hard work," John said, pushing the chubby boy aside. "Study it carefully, I won't bother you anymore." After saying that, John sat directly in Leo's original seat and looked at the options in front of the computer. "Do you want to understand the meaning of life? Do you want to truly live? I feel like I'm living a very real life right now." Looking at this text, John chuckled to himself, then gently clicked the yes option in front of him. The moment he pressed the button, John disappeared from the spot to Leo's astonished gaze. At the moment he clicked the mouse button, John didn't faint, but that was all. In his senses, 1 second he was clicking the button, and the next second he was in the high-speed train car beneath his feet. It's not just spatial teleportation, but also time compression, isn't it? Although it was only a moment for me, in reality, at least several days have passed. John glanced at the 4 unconscious men and 2 women around him, as well as the dozen or so characters from the original Resident Evil storyline. When he pressed the option, several of these people were still living their lives in reality, showing no signs of entering. Clearly, the main god had slowed down his time to synchronize him with those who entered later. While John pondered, the black-haired youth with several hideous scars on his face gradually regained consciousness. The scarred-faced man opened his eyes and slowly stood up, but his expression froze upon seeing the man standing before him. John, while surveying his surroundings, nodded slightly and said, "Not bad, you're the best among this group." The scarred-faced man's name was Zhang Ji. He was originally a member of the Central State team, but after obtaining captain qualifications, he was attacked by Freddy Krueger during the fusion process, becoming the semi-guide he is now. The duty of a semi-guide is that whenever a newcomer with captain potential appears, they must sacrifice their lives to fulfill the wishes of others under the main god's command, a truly miserable fate. Who exactly are you? Zhang Ji stared at the man before him, his face full of wariness. He woke up even earlier than him during the teleportation. His strength was definitely beyond that of an ordinary newcomer. Was he a former veteran who had been laid off and found new employment? Me? Just an ordinary emperor of the Earth Federation. Honestly, you probably haven't joined the Earth Federation yet, have you? John said, glancing at the cigarette Zhang Ji was about to light, his brow furrowing slightly. There are minors here. Can you please not smoke in front of us? What nonsense is this guy spouting? Has a fourth-tier inner demon fried his brain? Zhang Ji thought strangely. Could he be talking about himself? Although annoyed, Zhang Ji still put away his lighter and put the cigarette in his pocket. Just as the two were talking, a man beside him suddenly jumped up, looking around in panic. Suppressing his wariness of John, Zhang Ji said in a cold tone, "That's right, you're the one who came here this time." Oh. He paused, remembering the man had spoken to him similarly, and glanced back at John, who was still surveying his surroundings, before mechanically replying, "The most well-mannered of the people here. Where is this place? Who are you? Why am I here?" the man asked repeatedly, deliberately using English because of the foreigners present. Zhang Ji scanned the room, seeing everyone was awake, and answered together, thinking carefully, "It must have implanted everything into our minds." The group carefully recalled what they had in their minds and found that something had indeed been added, something about survival and life. This was a game. Who created it was no longer important. Perhaps it was the gods, perhaps it was the devil. They would place choices before those who felt lost about the future, and then throw those who felt they were decaying into scenes from horror movies. After everyone understood their predicament, Zhang Ji coldly said, "This is the first Resident Evil movie. Rookies, you're really lucky. You've encountered such an easy horror movie on your first visit. Even if you die, you'll die easily. Looks like you're right. This isn't Earth, at least not the Earth we know." A bespectacled, intellectual-looking woman said calmly. Facing everyone's gaze, she smiled slightly and said, "Hello, my name is Zonlan. How are you so sure?" Zhang Ji's brows furrowed sharply, inwardly cursing, "Damn it, this newbie is acting strangely. It's simple, because my smart device isn't showing a signal." Zonlan raised her right hand, on which she wore an ivory white wristwatch. As smart terminals worn by citizens of the Earth Federation, they can absolutely connect to the upper-level brain on Earth unless damaged. I don't believe any citizen would dare to damage a smart terminal while we're unconscious. After all, intentionally damaging a smart terminal will result in the AI judge lowering a citizen's rank, or even enslaving them, with no room for maneuver, depending on the severity of the offense. Moreover, Zonlan glanced at the characters in the story beside her, and at Zhang Ji's right hand, which was only wearing the Reincarnation Squad wristwatch, and said leisurely, "Right now on Earth, citizens without smart terminals are more precious than pandas." Chapter 168 His Majesty arrives beside us. What is this guy talking about? What's a smart terminal? Is it a new product in the real world? Zhang Ji looked at Zonlan blankly, feeling that something was getting out of control. The others listening to Zonlan's explanation also looked at their arms. Sure enough, the smart terminals in their hands were displaying a signal interruption icon. "We're doomed, we've really been abducted by aliens." A simple-minded middle-aged man lamented, the smart terminal in his hand shattering their illusions. They wished it were all just an illusion. "Wait, what are you talking about? What smart terminal? What Earth Federation?" Zhang Ji had lost all his professional airs at this point, looking at the people in front of him discussing what sounded like industry jargon, and quickly asked, "Uncle, you must have been here before the Earth Federation naturalized Earth, right?" Zonlan looked at the scarred man in front of him with some sympathy. Just 5 days ago, the Earth Federation officially occupied Earth, making everyone its citizens. After Zonlan's simple explanation, Zhang Ji finally understood what was going on. Then he stared wide-eyed back at the boy who was intently studying the information. He had just said he was the Emperor of the Earth Federation, right? These people didn't pay much attention to Zhang Ji. Zhang Zha said with a serious face, is it possible, possible, that we can spread the word about our current situation? Even if it's not His Majesty, but even if the Holy Lord or the Great General came, they should be able to easily wipe this place out, right? After all, it's just a horror movie. Zanlan shook her head helplessly and said, even the smart terminal can't receive the signal. I don't think there's much hope. Let's just try our best to survive. Let's introduce ourselves. My name is Zanlan, Zan as in sunshine and Lan as in the mountain breeze. Before coming here, I was a writer. Before coming here, I kept complaining about not having the desire to write, but I didn't expect to end up here. Mu Gang. Mu as in mu, gang as in gang. Li Zai. Zhang Zha. The group introduced themselves to each other. Finally, Zanlan looked at the boy squatting in the corner and walked over with a smile. Hey, little brother, what's your name? As she finished speaking, Zanlan gently put her hand on the boy's shoulder, but the boy grabbed it halfway through, and then turned around to reveal a handsome and familiar cold face. Your Majesty, what brings you here? Zanlan stammered. These words caused a stir, drawing the attention of all the newcomers. Staring at the handsome young man who hadn't uttered a word, everyone was stunned. His face was exactly like the portrait on which he had sworn allegiance to the Earth Federation. This place is interesting, so I plan to stay here for a while, John said, gently releasing Zanlan's wrist. Also, I don't like unnecessary physical contact. As he spoke, the entire carriage beneath them began to slow down. John looked at everyone and said slowly, all right, the horror movie is about to begin. See the other watch on your wrists? It says Matthew Addison. You can't leave more than 100 meters away from the Black Captain from the original story. As for the rest, you can ask Zhang Ji, the scarred veteran. He'll answer you. After saying this, John fell silent and began to carefully sense the world. After the carriage came to a complete stop, he could feel the feeling of being detached from the world disappear, and he could begin to officially influence the world beneath his feet. Interesting, this is the right place. John grinned and walked out. Watching John's departing figure, Zhang Zha and the others exchanged glances, unable to hide their excitement. This was a sure thing. Although they hadn't been with the Earth Federation for very long and didn't know much about the glorious deeds of the Homelanders, they only needed to know that their emperor was very powerful. Hey, is that underage guy really the emperor? And he even ruled Earth? Zhang Ji asked Zanlan and the others, completely bewildered, but was immediately glared at by them. Are you crazy? How dare you speak to His Majesty like that? You'll become a slave. Being glared at by these newcomers, Zhang Ji felt more speechless than when Freddy killed him. As the story began, the group followed closely behind John. Although most of their attention was on John's back, they also took the opportunity to ask Zhang Ji all sorts of questions. For example, things that newcomers must know, such as entering the God space and receiving 1,000 reward points after completing the mission, and returning after reaching 50,000 reward points. The way the group of people were talking together was too conspicuous, quickly drawing the ire of the dozen or so mercenaries. Matthew Addison stopped, watching the security guards from the company registration documents chatting as if they were on vacation, and sneered, what are you talking about? That's so funny? Let me hear it too. Zhang Zha and the others were startled. They had always thought of themselves as beings outside of reality, meaning that horror movies were just that, horror movies, and the characters in the plot couldn't possibly interact with them. They only needed to avoid those terrifying monsters. Now, this guy was directly calling them by name. The company records show your security guards, but I highly doubt whether the company's higher-ups made a mistake. You're all slow to react, walking weakly. It's obvious you haven't received any proper training. And what are those white watches you're wearing on your arms? I don't remember Umbrella Corporation having such things. Take them off and let me see. Matthew Addison pointed to the smart terminal in Mu Gang's hand. When Matthew pointed at him, Mu Gang took 2 steps back in fear, but still shook his head fiercely, saying, no, unauthorized deactivation of the smart terminal is a crime. I absolutely will not hand it over to you. Normally it would be fine, but with John, the Emperor, here, breaking the law in front of the Emperor was like sticking a straw into a cesspool, recklessly courting death. At the same time, the new recruits' gazes instinctively turned to John, who was watching the show like a spectator, as if looking at their leader. Breaking the law? And is this underage kid your leader? Matthew noticed their gazes, looked at John, and took a few steps forward, saying, "Kid, make them take that thing called a smart terminal off and give it to us, or else," splat. Before Matthew Addison could finish speaking, John kicked him in the stomach, knocking him to the ground, then stepped on his forehead and whispered, "Watch your tone, when you ask something, say please. Don't move." Due to John's extreme actions, all the mercenaries pointed their guns at him. But the next moment, all of them coughed up blood and flew backward, crashing into the wall. Chapter 169, Sweeping Away the Beehive. "Looks like you guys aren't very obedient." John lifted his foot from Matthew's head and looked at the mercenaries lying on the ground. Sweat beaded on Zhang Ji's back. Even though he had assumed this guy was strong, this scene was still beyond his expectations. What just happened? As expected of His Majesty, "I'm safe now." The newcomer felt completely reassured looking at the mighty John. "You, who are you?" Matthew clutched his throbbing stomach, looking up at the boy in front of him. "HMPH, we're not some security guard from your company." Li Ziae, a high school student, stepped forward, hands on his hips, and said arrogantly, "Listen up, you natives. We are citizens of the Earth Federation, and this is our Holy Majesty." "Earth Federation?" His Majesty. The mercenaries, clutching their swollen faces, looked at the boy with apprehension. Although they didn't understand, given this guy's unpredictable strength, they knew they had no chance of winning. "Matthew Addison, right?" John crouched down, looking at the black captain in front of him. This hive we're standing on is now completely overrun by the Red Queen, and every corpse carries a virus that makes them bite anyone they see. If you go down now, there's a high chance you'll die instantly. So I'm giving you a chance. Now, take your teammates and get out of the hive, or you can stick to your own ideas and continue, only to be killed here by me. John stared at the black captain. The main god's requirement was not to leave within 100 meters of this guy, not that he couldn't kill him. In other words, if he killed this guy now, he wouldn't lose reward points. In fact, he might even gain rewards for significantly altering the plot. Moreover, once this guy died, the 100-meter restriction should disappear, and he could just have the Central Continent team carry the corpses along. However, John felt that compared to the original outcome of heavy casualties, it would be better to try keeping these people alive. This would be more difficult, and the rewards should be higher. Hearing John's choice, Matthew didn't quite believe him. Viruses seemed too far-fetched, so his mind was still focused on completing the mission and making money. But, the original mission, slap. Before Matthew could finish, John slapped him across the face, sending him spinning through the air before crashing to the ground. Wrong answer. This isn't a question for your opinion. I'm giving you another chance to choose. John ignored the mercenaries pointing guns at them, his gaze turning coldly to the black captain. Zonlan and the others instinctively shuddered, secretly alarmed by John's domineering behavior. This His Majesty didn't seem so easy to deal with. Zhang Zha, feeling a pang of sympathy, said, "Wait, Your Majesty, perhaps we should be more patient with them. If we speak politely, they'll listen." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Zha sensed something was amiss. His teammates, who had been chatting amiably, now scurried away like the plague, and Zhang Ji wore a mocking smile. "Are you teaching me how to do things?" John turned to look calmly at Zhang Zha. Realizing he had spoken without thinking, Zhang Zha shuddered, then forced a tearful smile and waved his hand, saying, You continue, I won't disturb you." John slowly withdrew his gaze, continuing to look at the captain. "What's your choice?" Forced by circumstances, Matthew, barely recovering from his dizziness, clutched his dislocated neck and stammered, "I'll have my team leave the hive immediately." As Matthew conceded defeat, the rigid and solemn voice of the main god rang in John's ears, "Ensure the entire mercenary team leaves the hive and reaches the surface. Mission complete. Reward, a level side quest, 7,000 points. Failure deducts 2,000 points." Hearing the voice, John's lips curled slightly. Sure enough, when first entering the horror genre, this zero-rated newbie status was the best for gaining points. Just slightly altering the plot yielded such high rewards. In the second or third horror movies, this level of difficulty would be lucky to get a B-level side quest. Regaining his composure, John noticed that Matthew Addison's mark on his wristwatch had completely disappeared, meaning he was finally no longer within 100 meters of this guy. "Since you've all chosen to leave, I'll see you off," John said with a smile, now free of the restriction. The next moment, he led everyone present into a building on the surface. The change in the surrounding scenery immediately caused everyone to gasp in surprise, and John heard the sound of reward points being credited to his account. It's that again. Is his mind like some kind of special teleportation? Zhang Ji wondered, while the people around him were already looking at John with the eyes of someone looking at a god. Now that the restriction is lifted, I'm going to take advantage of my newbie status to rack up points. John looked at the beehive in front of him and gently stretched his shoulders. The next moment, John's figure disappeared from the spot, and he was already in midair, then raised his right arm and gently threw a punch downwards. Boom! The calm, flowing air, stirred by John, transformed into a massive, kilometer-wide blast of air erupting from his right arm, crashing with unstoppable force onto the ground above the hive. Whether soft soil or sturdy steel, the impact of the blast forced it deep into the earth, causing the ground to tremble violently. A powerful gust of wind swept outwards, nearly blasting the Central State team and mercenaries away. After barely regaining their footing, they looked up to see that the once magnificent complex above the hive had vanished. In its place lay a cylindrical crater, kilometers wide and seemingly bottomless, starkly visible before them. What the hell is this power? Even a nuclear bomb wouldn't have this kind of destructive force. Looking at the scene before him, Zhang Ji felt a chill run down his spine. In his mind, the supreme god was like a brothel madam seeing a wealthy man, frantically urging him to immediately begin the captain's trial. I'm doomed. Zhang Ji's face was ashen. Even though he tried his best to stall, the captain's trial would begin at the latest in the next horror movie, and then he would be forced into a life-or-death duel with this monster. At this moment, John heard the cold and solemn voice of the main god in his mind. S-level horror side quest completed, reward points 20,000. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Million Zombie Horde. S-rank horror side quest completed, reward points 20,000. Back on the ground, John frowned slightly upon hearing the voice beside him. So little? He'd thought he'd get a double S rank. As a complete newbie, destroying the hive only yielded 20,000 points plus an S rank side quest? That's like giving a beggar a pittance. Not to mention, the zombies and lickers inside the hive alone would have given more than 10,000 reward points, and that was deducted too. It's probably because I just completed an A-rank side quest, and my rating with the main guard has probably skyrocketed now, John thought, turning back to give Zhang Ji, whose face was ashen, a meaningful look. Everyone else was stunned by the seemingly endless crater before them. Faced with John's immense personal power, they felt utterly insignificant. Zanlan and Zhang Zha even thought absurdly, so many Resident Evil stories have ended just like that. Your Majesty is awesome. Li Zia cheered, then quickly walked up to John and asked familiarly, Your Majesty, what are we going to do next? Grind points, John replied casually, a vial of blue reagent now in his hand, the T-virus stock solution he'd grabbed earlier. Grind points? Li Zia asked, puzzled. Zanlan and Zhang Ji, seeing the vial, immediately understood. Your Majesty, you want to use the T-virus stock solution to mass-produce zombies, then kill those mutated zombies to obtain, Zanlan cleverly covered her mouth halfway through her sentence. The mercenaries and protagonists from Resident Evil were right beside her. If she revealed the contents of the god space and aroused their suspicion, she would have her reward points deducted. The mercenary, still bewildered, asked, What is this T-virus serum? And this huge hole, he didn't really make it, did he? What else? His Majesty is invincible. Li Xiaoi looked at the group with the eyes of someone looking at country bumpkins, while Zhang Zha was currently undergoing a fierce internal struggle. Injecting innocent people with the T-virus serum to infect them and then killing them, that's too cruel. I should have tried to dissuade them. Zhang Zha was torn, but ultimately sighed. He reassured himself, I can't persuade them anyway. Survival is the priority. They didn't die because of me, and I will never become such a cruel person. John ignored the various behaviors of the others and looked at the reincarnation watch on his arm. There were still 2 hours and 54 minutes left on the countdown timer in the upper left corner of the watch, which was his total time to rack up points. Once the time was up, he could return to the main god space. Looks like I need to hurry. John, looking at the T-virus stock solution in his hand, activated his supervision, analyzing the components of the T-virus stock solution down to every single atom. Then, he vanished instantly, immediately drawing the attention of everyone present. After all, the first time he disappeared, several people were brought from the hive to the surface. The second time, the hive was immediately destroyed, and now it was the third time. The mercenaries wanted to ask Zhang Zha and the others where John had gone, but the next moment they saw corpses flying in from an unknown distance like dumplings being dropped into a pot, turning into piles of corpses before their eyes. The sheer scale of the piles of corpses covering the hillside was incredibly shocking. Zonlan carefully observed and found that the corpses included both men and women, and most were wearing prison uniforms from various countries. These should all be criminals, Zonlan said to the others. She remained calm because the corpses had no external injuries, as if they were in a deep sleep. Soon, the piles of corpses accumulated into mountains, which in turn transformed into a sea of corpses, stretching as far as the eye could see. At least hundreds of thousands of bodies, seemingly appearing from nowhere, continued to join the army. 10 zombies, 1 reward point. So, this 100,000 reward points should be enough for me. John's figure reappeared. Looking at the million-strong sea of corpses before him, he gently broke the T-virus liquid in his hand, and the evaporating gas spread freely in the air. Hey! You guys! Having dealt with the problem in front of him, John turned to the Central State team and said, "Take these." With that, John waved his hand, and a dozen or so guns equipped with energy weapons were thrown in front of the group. Seeing the scattered guns, Li Ziwei quickly stepped forward, picked one up, and hugged it. Then he looked at John and asked, "Your Majesty, what kind of guns are these? Are there any enemies we need to deal with? I'm giving you a chance. After these guys turn into zombies, you can use these weapons to kill as many as you want before the countdown ends. How many reward points you get then depends on your own abilities," John said calmly. In his view, these people, as citizens of the Earth Federation, were, after all, his dogs, and he couldn't let them go hungry. Upon hearing John's words, the Samsara team's gaze towards him changed. Li Ziwei immediately exclaimed excitedly, "Your Majesty, I'm so moved. Do you need any women?" Before he finished speaking, John's gaze turned cold. If this high school student dared to offer himself up, he would skin him alive. Brother Zhangji just said that everyone who returns to the main god space has one free opportunity to create a baby. Your Majesty, what type do you like? I can create one for you, I don't mind, Li Ziwei said shamelessly, completely ignoring the astonished looks of those around him. No one else expected this high school student to be so cunning. Mugang looked regretful. Why hadn't he thought of such a high-act suggestion? John's expression softened. Although he was being cunning, at least his intentions were commendable. He wasn't trying to disgust him. The main god space? What's that? A mercenary asked. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Ziwei's expression froze. Because he had revealed the main god's influence to the characters in the storyline, he heard the main god deducting reward points. As for what John had just said, those points had also been deducted, but he didn't care about such a small amount. John didn't comment on Li Ziwei's words, but urged, "Take this opportunity to familiarize yourself with the weapons. In about 10 minutes, these guys should wake up." Upon hearing this, the group excitedly squatted down, picked up the energy weapons, and casually fired a shot at the ground in the distance. With a loud bang, the ground in front of them immediately shattered as if it had been hit by a grenade, creating a crater a meter wide. Chapter 171 John's Races, John. Wow, this energy weapon is incredibly powerful. Li Ziwei exclaimed excitedly, looking at the craters that had exploded in front of him. There was practically no recoil, which meant it would be a devastating blow to the zombies. Zonlan and the others also quickly opened fire on the open ground in the distance, watching the craters explode one after another with excitement. Just as these people were venting their frustrations on the ground, Zhang Ji, looking rather simple and honest, leaned over and chuckled, "Hey, is your Earth Federation still hiring? How about I get some paperwork done?" "What, are you bored out of your mind? Not doing the semi-god mission for the main god anymore?" John said softly, "The main god should be urging you already, right? The next mission will start the captain selection?" Faced with John's undisguised honesty, Zhang Ji's expression changed. Then he said with a crestfallen look, "I can't hide it from you, brother. To be honest, It's true what you said. I can't beat you either, so I've put it aside for a while. Let's get along well for the last few days and keep to ourselves, okay? John nodded non-committally, saying nothing. After all, he absolutely had to get the captain's authority. As long as he obtained the captain's authority for the Central Continent team and his gene lock hadn't reached level 4, the main god would forcibly upgrade his gene lock by 1 level, and that was exactly what John needed. According to the world's setting, anyone who considers themselves human, even if they aren't from this world, or even if they're not a living being but a robot, can qualify to unlock their genetic lock. However, leaving aside their first life, John currently doesn't identify as human. In his eyes, whether they are normal humans, beastmen, or even robots, they are all just his dogs. Just as a person wouldn't consider themselves a dog, John doesn't believe he's confined to any particular race or considers himself human. Or rather, John Kent's race is simply John Kent, defying any definition. This lack of self-identity means that this outsider is absolutely unable to unlock his genetic lock, so he'll have to rely on his captain's authority to forcibly unlock the first-tier lock. However, John glanced lightly at Zhang Ji, who seemed completely at ease. This guy seems quite self-aware, let's see if we can save him later. While they were talking, the members of the Central Continent team were already playing around with their energy guns like crazy. If they weren't hitting someone and instantly dying, they'd probably be playing a live CS game on the spot. While the group was having fun, the T-virus serum that John had shattered began to take effect, and the mountain of corpses before them began to tremble violently. Under the influence of the virus serum, the brain signals of these million zombies, whose hearts John had shattered, re-emerged, and they began to think again. However, compared to their previous normal state, the content of their thoughts was horrifying. Their minds were filled with nothing but eating. Oh my god! Li Zihui cried out in fright, watching the countless corpses rise to their feet. These people had never seen anything like this before, and their hearts pounded wildly. Rumble. On the massive mountain of corpses, because each corpse, upon regaining consciousness, immediately stood up, a massive collapse occurred. Zombies constantly lost their footing and tumbled down as the corpses below rose, causing the already enormous mountain of corpses to crumble, with bodies surging towards them like a torrent. Shoot. Otherwise, we'll be overwhelmed and devoured by this horde of zombies. Zhang Ji roared, then picked up his energy gun and began firing wildly at the zombie horde in front of him, each shot shattering 4 or 5 zombies. The people around him immediately followed suit, quickly becoming excited. In this open terrain, as long as they fought and retreated, these zombies couldn't catch them at all. And after firing 2 or 3 shots, they would hear the notification sound of +1 God's reward points in their ears. Thinking that they could exchange these points for superhuman abilities after returning to the God's realm, these people silently cheered, "Long live the Emperor!" Among them, Zhang Zha, holding his gun, awkwardly retreated, watching his teammates killing with gusto, and he too felt a surge of urgency. However, remembering his earlier vow to himself that he would never become a murderous monster like Homelander, he couldn't shake the thought. What are you standing there for? Kill them. Lin Ziyi, seeing Zhang Zha only retreating, shoved him hard and reminded him, "This is a rare opportunity. I've already gotten over 30 reward points. Anyway, these are all death row inmates, they deserve to die. Besides, I wasn't the one who turned into a zombie. I'll kill them even if I don't kill them all. Let's do it," Zhang Zha reassured himself, then raised his hand and fired 3 shots at the pile of corpses in front of him. Reward points +1, the solemn voice of the main god rang in Zhang Zha's ears, causing him to accelerate the speed of his firing. Biu. With the 5 of them firing wildly, more than a dozen zombies were killed every second. At this rate, they could each get at least 5,000 reward points by the end of the countdown. But things were clearly not that simple. After more than 10 minutes, when the total number of zombies killed by the Zhangzhou team exceeded 10,000, the continuous accumulation of reward points was immediately judged by the main god as score farming. As it started, John, watching intently, soon sensed an invisible force influencing the zombies' bodies. Those still alive began to mutate. The previously sluggish zombies gradually became more agile, their speed increasing little by little. Holy crap, is this just my imagination? These zombies are faster, aren't they? Li Zihui stared wide-eyed at the horde of zombies. That's right, these zombies are half as fast as they were at the beginning. This wasn't in the original storyline, Zonlan complained, looking at the horde. Is this some kind of game mechanic from that god, preventing us from racking up points? As they spoke, their gazes all turned to John watching from the sky. Although His Majesty in the sky made no move, just his presence gave them a sense of security. His Majesty won't abandon us, Zonlan thought confidently. With the god increasing his strength, once everyone reached 2,000 points, the zombies' pace gradually became similar to that of ordinary people. Even as they tried to retreat, the zombies began to close in bit by bit. Finally, the older woman was the first to run out of energy. She stumbled and fell to the ground, letting out a scream as she watched the zombies rush towards her. But John then tossed her to safety. Chapter 172 120, 000 Reward Points. You guys keep playing, John said calmly, arms crossed, as he tossed the middle-aged woman aside. Now that they were completely safe, everyone perked up, their fear of the horde of zombies fading, and they focused all their energy on earning the reward points. The second to be eliminated was Lizae, who was pulled away by John after earning 2,407 reward points. The third was Zonlan, who earned 2,436 reward points. After that, it was Mugang with 2,507, Zhang Zha with 2,786, and finally Zhang Ji, who feigned defeat after racking up 3,061 reward points. Watching Zhang Ji, whom John rescued last, everyone had to admit that the veterans were indeed powerful, able to endure for so long, and they also looked forward to how they would strengthen themselves in that so-called God space. Only after everyone had finished their tasks did John decide to eliminate the remaining 800,000 plus zombies. Looking at these zombies, John subconsciously recalled the monkeys in the original story who, after being enhanced by the god, went from being primitive monkeys in the rainforest to high-tech monkeys wielding laser weapons, forcing Zhang Zha to run rampant throughout the forest. The god system allows for point farming, but if you really exploit a particular area excessively, it will definitely provoke a strong resistance. Theoretically, the god's point farming mechanism can be infinitely improved, but to what extent? Let me test it out. John smiled, raised his fist, and swung it down violently. Boom! The earth trembled violently under the punch, and the god's notification sounded in John's ears, reward points plus 72151. With just one punch, 720,000 zombies were turned into mincemeat by John's fist. As the reward points increased, John was quickly judged by the god as malicious point farming, and the surviving zombies began to revolt violently. The zombies no longer wandered aimlessly, instead, they began frantically devouring the corpses of their kind that John had annihilated, using these minced meat as energy to drastically increase their own strength. Interesting. With the god's remote intervention, John could see more and more, gradually discerning the god's methods for enhancing the zombies. Under this frenzied devouring, the zombies' bodies began to evolve dramatically, transforming from beings weaker than ordinary humans into flying zombies with long wings. With a gentle flap of their wings, the remaining 70,000 plus zombies, like flying cockroaches, soared into the sky, flying towards John. Disgusting. And that muscle strength, it's comparable to a typical Tier 2 zombie. John looked at the 70,000 Tier 2 zombies before him and couldn't help but laugh. He then threw another punch, annihilating another 90% of the zombies in front of him. The remaining zombies stopped what they were doing once more and began devouring the remains of their fallen comrades. Soon, a horde of 7,000 third-tier zombies, worth a total of 700, was born. After their advancement, they would face yet another punch from John. After round of John's onslaught, only one super zombie, whose strength was infinitely close to that of a mid-tier fourth-tier zombie, remained in the horde. The next second after its birth, it was blasted apart by John with a flick of his finger. The strongest ability can only reach the peak of the early stage of the fourth tier of the gene lock. It seems this is just the world of infinite terror. Those so-called primordial era zombies didn't come along. John commented, with this kind of combat power, I can play around with it. As long as it's not that guy from the original story who created infinite dimensions outside the box, I should have no enemies, right? John raised his wrist. His watch showed that there was still more than an hour left. Anyway, I'm just idling around. Let's farm another 100,000 reward points. As soon as he finished speaking, John's figure disappeared from the spot again, leaving this Hongzhou team, who didn't know how to evaluate it, staring blankly at the completely changed landscape in front of them. By the way, what about those mercenaries? Zhang Zha asked doubtfully. Surely John hadn't killed them. They seemed to have slipped away quietly while we were grinding monsters, and His Majesty didn't pay them any attention, Zanlan said. Then they saw the zombie horde falling from the sky like dumplings being dropped into a pot, along with a vial of T-virus undiluted by John. But this time, John repeated his previous actions without any results. He discovered that under the influence of the main god, the corpses had developed antibodies against the virus. Since they weren't zombies, there were no reward points. TCH, can't take a loss, John complained, then stopped worrying about it. After all, he had an S-level side quest, an A-level side quest, and nearly 120,000 reward points, which was enough. If he ran out later, he could just watch another horror movie and keep grinding. At the Umbrella Corporation headquarters, the executives stared in horror at the several-kilometer-long crater where the hive had been, and the millions of corpses piled up there. All they could think about was that they were doomed. What do we do? This boy's strength has exceeded the limits of what human civilization can currently withstand. What's even more terrifying is that, according to the investigation, this boy is actually one of our company's security guards. The executive looked incredulous, wondering if there was a computer malfunction. Such a dangerous person had been working as a security guard all along. If it weren't for the hive virus leak, they might never have known. Clearly, his destruction of the hive is a warning to us. We should immediately send someone to apologize to him and show that we have no intention of being his enemy, the executive ordered. They didn't know that John was just a passerby in this space, assuming this powerful figure would stay on Earth forever. John, on the other hand, was currently too lazy to continue expanding the Earth Federation here, and with enough reward points, he had no intention of paying them any attention. There are still over 40 minutes left. You can stay here, no one should bother you during this time, John said, glancing at his watch. Just wait quietly for the god's return. Thank you for your hard work, Your Majesty. Li Xiaoi eagerly trotted to John's side. Your Majesty, would you like a massage? If you want to die, you can try, John said, turning his head away, too lazy to pay attention to the sycophant. He then found a corner and stared blankly at the empty space in front of him. Li Xiaoi's face stiffened, and he gave an awkward laugh. His inexperience had led him to overdo it and annoy His Majesty. In the following tens of minutes, seeing nothing else to do, the newcomers gathered around and kept asking Zhang Ji about the god's space. Knowing he wouldn't survive the next horror movie, Zhang Ji didn't bother making up lies and told them almost everything he could, such as gene locks, team battles, and so on, making everyone's hearts pound. Fortunately, their Hongzhou team had randomly gotten His Majesty. The other teams should be the ones afraid, right? After the chat, the countdown on the wristwatches reached 0, and with a flash of white light, everyone returned to the main god space. By the way, do you guys feel any psychological pressure about the protagonist NTRing someone else? Chapter 173 Matter Reconstruction. On a vast, empty platform, a colossal sphere of light floated in the center, illuminating the entire platform like a sun. Beyond the platform lay boundless darkness, as if floating in the deepest void. The next moment, a flash of white light appeared, and 7 figures emerged from the light onto the deserted platform, the members of the Central Continent team. Is this the god's space? John surveyed his surroundings with unusual interest, then ignored the others and walked straight towards the enormous sphere of light. He reached out to gently touch it, but was blocked by an invisible force field just before he could get close. Interesting, John withdrew his arm at the opportune moment, not attempting to break it, but instead closing his eyes to begin creating a selection exchange, but he didn't sense any exchange list appearing. John pondered for a moment, then detached himself from the mind stone in his special ring. The next moment, he felt his consciousness begin to merge into the shimmering white light. However, without the protection of the mind stone, John's consciousness was officially invaded by the god. He could feel the light in front of him invading his mind as he merged into it. Want to copy my memories? Then here you are. John felt a strange power exploring his mind, and he cooperated by opening most of the area, leaving only a portion of his private study materials on his C drive. While he was being probed by the main god, a beautiful girl ran out of Zhang Ji's room and embraced him, then kissed him passionately in front of everyone. If you don't understand any rules, just ask the main god. You can communicate directly with your mind. Be careful with all exchanges except creating your own woman. Oh, and just choose any room. Think about what you want with your mind. Zhang Ji casually gave a few instructions, then excitedly picked up his creation and returned to his room. He was about to die in the next horror movie, and he had to go crazy in his last moments. Zhang Zha and the others stared blankly at Zhang Ji running back to his room. Then, thinking about the creation, the men exchanged knowing glances. Only Li Ziyi was somewhat regretful. John hadn't agreed to his offering plan. Zhang Zha and the other men walked to the orb of light, closed their eyes, and tried to create a beautiful woman. But the next moment, John's voice came from the side. Zhang Zha, I advise you not to create a human. Who? His Majesty is calling my name. Zhang Zha was so frightened that he exited the God's Exchange panel and, like everyone else, turned to look at John. I have a feeling that your fate of creating a human won't be good. John's brain was being invaded by the god, while his eyes browsed the God's Exchange panel. He casually said, of course, this is just a reminder. Whether you exchange it or not is up to you. Faced with a reminder, Zhang Zha hesitated about whether to create a human. But when he saw a flash of white light in front of Li Ziyi beside him, and then he ran towards the room with a blonde, blue-eyed beauty in his arms, his mentality immediately changed. Damn it, at worst I'll die, what's there to be afraid of? With his brain taken over by his second brother, Zhang Zha stomped his foot, closed his eyes, and chose to create a human. The next moment, a teenage girl with snow-white skin, hazy eyes, and lips like cinnabar appeared in front of Zhang Zha. The moment Zhang Zha saw the girl before him, his previously decaying, salty fish-like aura vanished instantly, as if he had been completely rejuvenated. His spirit and energy were entirely different. Was he following the same path again? John glanced at her without comment, then looked impatiently at the orb of light before him. Has the hell finished looking at it? Is it going to take up residence in my mind? At this moment, the god of war, faced with John's vast memories, couldn't possibly copy them all in a short time, even with frantic copying. John's mind contained all the technological data from Earth, Krypton, and Apocalypse. Combined with his current eyesight and super brain, he processed more information in a second than an ordinary person could in a lifetime. Even with a god of war's reading speed, it would take several minutes. Helpless, John could only look at Zonlan beside him, tossing her a bottle of T-virus serum, saying, use this. This, isn't it the T-virus? Zonlan hesitated. Wouldn't using it turn her into a zombie? After you finish using it, the God of God will repair it, and then you can unlock the level 1 gene lock, John said. I want to see the whole unlocking process to study it. This. Your Majesty, others can also cooperate in the research, Zonlan subconsciously declined. I have no interest in studying a man's body. Zonlan said, oh, the research you're talking about, you don't mean taking off all your clothes, do you? John said calmly, no need to take off all your clothes. I can see through things. You just need to get the injection. Of course, you can refuse my research. Zonlan. She subconsciously hugged her arms tightly and shook her head in refusal. I'd rather not. After saying that, the girl looked at John in front of her somewhat nervously, afraid that he would force himself on her, but only received a nod from him indifferently, indicating that he understood. As they were talking, John felt the light of the God of God begin to leave his mind. After sensing this, he ignored the somewhat embarrassed Zonlan beside him and began to seriously browse the exchange panel in front of him. The entire exchange list is divided into technology, magic legends, auxiliary, and entertainment categories. In addition, there are 6 personal attributes: intelligence, mental strength, cell vitality, nerve reaction speed, muscle tissue strength, and immunity strength. The remaining attributes are reward points and the number of horror movie side quests. However, John's 6 basic attributes are currently all marked with 3 question marks representing the unknown. After spending some time reviewing each exchange option, John focused his attention on the exchange panel for the one he had long desired. Matter reconstruction ability, rating 95 points, applicable to most horror movies. Based on the user's microscopic manipulation ability, it restructures the structure of matter. Requires 1A level side quest. Reward points. 5,000. The moment he clicked to buy, a thick beam of light descended from the sky, enveloping John completely. He then slowly floated in midair, countless tiny particles constantly floating from the beam onto John's body, somewhat laboriously merging into his body. This transformation lasted for over 10 minutes before ending. After John stepped out of the beam, he solemnly clapped his hands. Matter reconstruction. Activate. The next moment, the number of nuclear fusion reactors in his body, which had not increased for a long time, began to surge. Chapter 174 10 years and 3 days. Atoms, as essential building blocks of matter, are composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons. The number of protons determines the element type, neutrons determine the physical properties, and electrons determine the chemical properties. Different elements in the periodic table are formed based on the number of protons within the atom. For example, oxygen, located at position 8, has 8 protons. If the nucleus contains 79 protons, it forms gold. Therefore, the so-called alchemy can be achieved simply by scientifically increasing or decreasing the number of protons in the nucleus. Ordinary reincarnators, even those with the microscopic abilities of a fourth-order primary gene lock, can at most alter the molecular structure after gaining the ability to reconstruct matter, enabling them to forge iron into sharp knives and guns. While John's current matter reconstruction technique cannot create new matter out of thin air, his microscopic abilities allow him to automatically change the types of elements within his body through the principle of equivalent exchange. The next moment, John clasped his hands together, activating his matter reconstruction skill. His body provided the raw materials, acting as a testing ground, and nuclear fusion materials and PIM particles were produced frantically, automatically igniting and starting up. The number of nuclear fusion reactors in John's stomach, which had been dormant for a long time, began to rise rapidly. 250,000, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million. In a short instant, the number of reactors in John's body surged to over 3 million. Only after reaching the cell's capacity limit did the production rate slow down slightly, but even so, he was still creating 4 or 5 reactors per second. Finally finished. John looked at the increase in power with some joy. Previously, he had been limited by the production capacity of human civilization, and only now did he see a glimpse of unlimited growth. And, John stretched out his right hand, directly using his body, comparable to a humanoid star, to provide matter. A ball of hydrogen appeared in his hand. Then, under his matter reconstruction ability, it continuously transformed elements, sometimes becoming a lump of steel, and then transforming into a golden sphere. To Zonlan's astonishment, John's right hand began to move beyond simple material manipulation. A spear with a wooden shaft and a steel head appeared in his hand, but instantly bent violently, transforming into an alloy scimitar. Then, firearms, missiles, even nuclear bombs and particle colliders reappeared in his hands, until finally, before John, a human with exquisitely handsome features but no gender was created out of thin air. Human transmutation? Zonlan exclaimed in astonishment, recalling a concept from a certain anime. It should be considered human body construction. Although the body, composed purely of atoms, possesses a soul, it has no memory, like a newborn, John casually explained, clenching his fist lightly. His ability activated again, and the humanoid body before him began to collapse until it disappeared. He closed his eyes and opened the exchange panel again, randomly exchanging for various items, such as internal energy cultivation techniques, low-level magic explanations, and some biological serums. After exchanging these items, John looked up at the Supreme God and said, "Supreme God, proceed to the Nightmare on Elm Street world. The location is the neighboring Trisolaran star system, and the time frame is 10 years. Under the light of the Supreme God's sphere, his figure vanished from the spot, only to reappear in an instant. Your Majesty." Zonlan couldn't help but exclaim, for compared to the John before, his clothing, demeanor, and even appearance had undergone a tremendous change. Having spent 10 years in the story world, John's previously somewhat immature 17-year-old appearance had matured, becoming exceptionally handsome. The ruthless killing intent that once clung to his brows had been replaced by a confident assertion of complete control over all things. 10 years? John paused, looking at the changes around him. Then, remembering he hadn't finished his experiment with the cosmic annihilation device, he turned to the Supreme God and said, "Supreme God, exchange another 3 days for Nightmare on Elm Street. The location is where I left last time." When John returned from the Supreme God's space this time, his clothes had changed again. He then looked at Zonlan beside him and asked, "Did you call me 3 days ago for something?" Oh, stared at by the handsome man before her, who seemed like a god, Zonlan blushed and stammered. Finally, She handed over the T-virus serum, saying, "Here, take this back." Looking at the blue bottle, John thought for a moment before realizing it was something he had given her 10 years ago, wanting her to cooperate in the research. He said casually, "No need for that. You keep it. And give these to them for me." With that, John flicked his wrist, and 5 more bottles of T-virus serum appeared before him. He then went into an empty room in the Supreme God's space, leaving Zonlan standing there, stunned. For His Majesty, has 10 years already passed? Zonlan stared blankly at the tightly closed door in front of her. The next day, after Zhang Zha finished questioning Lori, everyone sat together, except for Zhang Ji and John. Li Xiaoi looked at the closed door and asked, "Should we call His Majesty and the others?" "No need, they might be making babies right now, let's not disturb them." Mu Gang gave a knowing look, and the other men exchanged knowing smiles. Zonlan listened speechlessly to their dirty jokes, thinking about what happened last night, and after hesitating for a while, decided not to tell them. After chatting and laughing for a while, Li Xiaoi suggested, "Let's start discussing what to exchange for. Our 3,000 plus reward points should be enough to exchange for a lot of good stuff. Since there are no side quests, I've decided to do what Zhang Ji said in yesterday's horror movie in exchange for some weapons and cultivation techniques to practice," Mu Gang said, sharing his thoughts. Zonlan then took out the T-virus serum John had given her yesterday, saying, "His Majesty asked me to give this to you yesterday. After the injection, the main god will repair it, and you can unlock the first tier gene lock." The first tier gene lock. Everyone present was shocked, then stared intently at the reagent, having learned from Zhang Ji how powerful the gene lock was. "Then inject it now," Zhang Zha said excitedly. Half an hour later, everyone present felt the powerful energy within their bodies, their hearts pounding wildly. Zhang Zha excitedly hugged Lolly, vowing in his heart, "I will definitely bring you to life." But the next moment, in Zhang Zha's perspective, the surrounding scenery changed drastically. His familiar teammates disappeared, replaced by a group of strangely dressed white people looking at him with ill intent. "Welcome to the demon team, scum. Your creations look quite good. Behave yourself and let us have some fun." Chapter 175 John the Copy. The Demon Team. In another main god space, Zhang Zha, holding a petite and adorable lolly in his arms, looked at the malicious white people in front of him with extreme vigilance. Zhang Zha. The lolly in his arms grabbed Zhang Zha's clothes uneasily, feeling as if she had entered some unpleasant place, and said anxiously. Zhang Zha hugged Lolly tightly, forcing himself to forget the insults these people had hurled at his girlfriend. He forced a smile and said, "Brothers, what is the demon team? I used to be a member of the Central Continent team. How did I end up here?" "Huh, this yellow piglet is quite tolerant," a white youth sneered. "Everyone in the demon team is a clone of other teams. That means your so-called memories are all implanted in your brain by the main god, understand? Meat pig. And here's some good news, our team is a breeding team," the youth mocked. "That means we'll squeeze every single reward point out of you. If you don't agree, we'll make you agree." A breeding team, Zhang Zha tightened his embrace of Lolly, and under her uneasy gaze, he softened his demeanor and smiled. "Brothers, I have over 3,000 reward points I haven't redeemed. I'll give them all to you. This pig is quite sensible, so I'll leave you 10 reward points," the leading white man said with satisfaction, then looked at the lolly in Zhang Zha's arms. "But this girl is for me to play with." "Fuck you," Zhang Zha roared, grabbing the girl in his arms and taking a few steps forward, kicking the man hard in the head, but the white youth simply raised his hand to block Zhang Zha's full force kick. But Zhang Zha's purpose was not to attack the man. He kicked off the youth's arm with his right leg and rushed into the room. Zhang Zha's eyes were filled with determination. As long as he returned to the main god's room, he could protect the lolly in his arms. But the next moment, a 2-meter-tall strong man blocked his way, grinning maliciously, and gently pressed down on him. Boom! Zhang Zha spat out blood and slammed to the ground, his internal organs almost bursting, while the lolly in his arms rolled to the side, her knees and elbows scraped by the ground. "Pretty clever, then I'll reward you by letting you watch your creation be taken turns being humiliated." The white man smiled and stepped forward, reaching for Lolly under Zhang Zha's bloodshot gaze. "Beasts, let me go." Zhang Zha tried to struggle, but couldn't break free from the other's grip. Seemingly finding him too noisy, the 2-meter-tall burly man twisted his jaw, tearing it open. A promising seedling. The only Asian-looking youth standing to the side, not participating in their impending orgy, smiled and commented on Zhang Zha's desperate struggle even with his limbs broken. Splat. Just as the white man was about to reach for the trembling lolly, a naked boy fell from the sky, his soft body bouncing slightly after hitting the ground. Another newcomer? Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at the naked boy. They had never seen anyone come to the demon team naked before. John clutched his head in agony, scrambling to his feet, feeling as if his head was about to explode. He had just been preparing to exchange his energy with a main god to return to 10 years of Nightmare on Elm Street, but now he was experiencing a splitting headache and an unprecedented weakness, as if he had returned to the time before the system binding. Forcing his eyes open, he saw the unfamiliar group staring at him. And Zhang Zha, whose limbs had been twisted and whose jaw had been dislocated, looking at him with excited eyes. He immediately realized where he was, the demon team. That means I'm a clone. John endured the excruciating pain of his brain as he got to his feet, sensing the strength of his body. His basic physical attributes were twice that of a normal person, and his mental strength, energy, control, and memory were all at normal levels. What a terrible start. I didn't bring my special ring, and my only remaining ability is the matter reconstruction ability. With my current control, I can't change the atomic composition at all. I don't have any materials on me to create, and my head is about to explode from the original's vast memories, John summarized, clutching his head. His self-answered question, ignoring those around him, immediately annoyed the white youths. The burly man, over 2 meters tall, looked at the fair-skinned, beautiful, and seemingly pitiful John and licked his lips, saying, "He's mine. I'll have the first taste. It's been a long time since anyone dared to talk to me like that. I kind of miss it." Watching the large white man approach him step by step, John revealed a sinister smile, saying, "I suddenly remembered what I can do now. Since this body was created by the god of war, it means I can unlock my genetic lock." As soon as John finished speaking, his eyes went blank, and in just a moment, he entered the first stage of the genetic lock. As the most basic stage of the genetic lock, even a nerdy guy with extremely poor physical abilities could take down 3 unarmed special forces soldiers with his bare hands after unlocking it. Looking at the blank-eyed boy in front of him, the burly white man didn't care at all. He was a third-tier flesh-based ability user. How could he be afraid of this blank first-tier newbie? As he spoke, the burly man stretched out his right arm, but the next moment his expression changed slightly, and he withdrew his hand. Along his original trajectory, an orange-yellow semicircular energy weapon slashed past. Had the burly man not withdrawn, his wrist would have been broken. Looks like multidimensional Vishanti magical energy can still be delivered here? John's lips curled slightly. To everyone's astonishment, his gene lock advanced another level, entering the second tier. How is this possible? A second-tier gene lock? The demon team members were all dumbfounded. Those who joined the demon team were all promising newcomers capable of unlocking locks. Basically, as long as they unlocked a first-tier lock within a single horror movie, and their strengths didn't overlap, they could be recruited. The boy before them had actually unlocked a second-tier lock, meaning he had unlocked 2 tiers within a single horror movie. Such potential was terrifying. At this moment, the demon team members' faces darkened. Realizing they had offended him, they immediately made a decision. This boy could not be allowed to live, he had to be eliminated as soon as possible. But just as they made this decision, John's aura suddenly changed again, a terrifying sense of threat emanating from his body. Gene Lock Level 3. Activate. Now, you are the prey. John opened his eyes, his bloodthirsty gaze sweeping over the demon team. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all, see you in the next video.